All right, good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the Planning Board, valued community representatives, I welcome you all to this evening's assembly of the Saco Planning Board. As chair, it is my privilege to convene this gathering dedicated to the thoughtful planning and development of our community. Today, we come together with a shared commitment to shaping the future of our city in a manner that reflects our values, respects our heritage, and fulfills the needs of our residents both now and in the future. Our agenda tonight contains important matters, each requiring our careful consideration, expertise, and collaboration. As we engage in our deliberations, let us remember the profound impact these decisions will have on the lives of all, keeping in mind we are residents like you. It is our duty to maintain transparency, fairness, and inclusivity in our proceedings, ensuring that the voices of all are heard and respected. Together, we must embrace the responsibility entrusted to us by our community, working diligently and thoughtfully to chart a course that fosters growth, prosperity, and harmony. With that, I would like to call this meeting of the Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026 Planning Board to order. I look forward to the productive discussions and meaningful outcomes that lie ahead. Thank you. This evening, joining us, myself, the chair, Matt Provenzel, and to my left, our Vice Chair, Joyce Larry Clark, along with Planning Board members Jeff Brucho, Catherine Palini, and to my right, Jim Moyer and Chris Gagnon. Our staff members with us this evening are our City Planner, Charles Tettleman, and our Planning Compliance Coordinator, Lisa Harmon. Along with our City Council Liaison from Ward 7, Nathan Johnson. And with that, we'll move to our first item on our agenda, which is our review of our February 24th, 2026 meeting minutes. Do board members have any questions, comments, or edits on those minutes?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Motion by Jim and a second by Joyce to accept the minutes as presented. Any additional discussion on that motion? All right, those in favor. Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 6-0. Our next item on our agenda is just a brief overview of our Planning Board public hearing guidelines. This is a document developed by the board and city staff outlining the procedure in place for public hearings held. This explains the purpose of the public hearings, the outline procedure of reviewing an application, public comment presentation, and meeting duration. If anyone has any questions about this document or the process, please let us know. We have hard copies available at the rear of the auditorium along with digital copies on the city's website for review. Our next item, number 5, is our public comment period. This is where we'll open for a period, I mess up my words here. We'll open our public comment period to hear from members of the public. This comment period is limited to a total of 15 minutes to items not under Planning Board review. The Planning Board appreciates public comments and knows that public comment about matters before us can help the board understand neighborhood concerns, review an application, or help address an outstanding item. Those wishing to make statements about an application that is under Planning Board review are asked to provide those statements during the applicable public hearing period. Comments during this period are limited to 3 minutes. If there are multiple members of the public looking to speak, we may reduce that time to accommodate all speakers. So with that, if anyone is with us this evening to speak or have any general questions about planning, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Chair, may I just suggest something? We may have some folks here who are not familiar with the Saco Planning Board process and may wish to be submitting public comment on specifically there's 2 applications here that are completeness review, and we will not be having public comment on it. So I would just say for general understanding that if there are members of the public who wish to speak on item 6A or 6B, Flag Pond Road rezoning, or the Easy Street application, this would be the time to speak because there's no public hearing or no public comment associated with those two. So that would just be my suggestion, because I know I see some folks here who may not be, I typically don't do this, but just in the interest of people's time and keeping them aware, because I know that we have some folks not familiar with Saco here.
Sure, thank you.
So,
Yep, so this would be, but please keep in mind that they're applications for completeness, so they're not under the board's review. So we can collect questions or comments, and we can have staff add those as part of the packet. If the board finds that the application is complete, the board will then schedule a public hearing, so there will be a point where you can come before the board during a public hearing period as well. So, yes. So again, with that, if anyone would like to speak, again, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record, and we will collect those comments and address them accordingly.
I don't need the mic that high. I'm pretty short. So I'm Paul Santabor, and I live at 21 Tabby Way, which is part of Mackenzie Preserve, newish development right off Flag Pond Road. And I'm going to speak to the thing we just talked about. So the rezoning proposal, it just came across our HOA's radar, and I'm the president of our HOA. Have another member of our board here. And we're, definitely concerned about any rezoning to residential, especially with, such a large development, kind of as a sub-proposal or idea. That's what it looked like in the documentation of 200 condo units. I think that would be kind of eye-raising or eyebrow-raising to us. So what I would like to say is a couple things. I think it's important that we not do the kind of classic NIMBY behavior of no more development. I mean, we just built a development of single-family homes. We certainly, I certainly would be more okay with more of those going in. 200 condos just feels like kind of a big stretch in a really high traffic load in an already stressed area. So I think putting that out is important. And beyond traffic flow, I worry about that entrance exit right there on the overpass, the foot of the overpass of Flag Pond Road, and the turnpike. That would be a major concern. So yeah, I think beyond that, we know this is very preliminary, and if things move forward, interested in being involved in the process. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Wes Clark, also a director of the same HOA in 8 Tabby Way, Saco, Maine. And similar concerns, looking at it, I understand if the owner wants to rezone it from industrial, but I would recommend the zoning be considered similar to as it's zoned directly across the street or beside them on that same street, all LDR zoning. And I think that LDR, low density residential, makes a lot more sense for that land if it were to be rezoned, or it can stay as industrial because it's next to the interstate. That was the original zoning that it is. As industrial, it is good as farmland or that kind of a thing. And that just seems appropriate from my perspective, being a homeowner in that area. And I'm not sure the proposal seemed to say multi-use, and I don't see that as a zoning category in the city. Maybe it is, and I've missed that. Somebody could educate me on that one. I'm not sure what multi-use actually means and what would be permitted. I understand the example in there is one of the examples that could be permitted under multi-use, but I don't understand what that category is. So, very, very good. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. Thank you for the comments. We will continue to our next item on the agenda. This is item 6. This is our planning applications for review and public hearings. We have 3 items on this agenda this evening. We have 2 applications of completeness review, excuse me, and 1 continued public hearing and application review. The first one is Flag Pond Road, map 76, lots 12-2 and 13. And this is an application of completeness review for a petition for a zoning map amendment to rezone 2 parcels from industrial to Portland Road. So with that, Charles, do you have anything to add on this item before we begin?
Sorry. So the reminder that for zoning text amendments, the role of the planning board is to ultimately provide a recommendation to city council. So it is not the planning board's, ultimate discretion to approve or disapprove, but rather provide a recommendation to city council. They had it was on new business last night, so the council was brought to their attention. There was 2 public comments submitted after the packet was posted, and you guys have that in your after-the-fact packet. I think that's about it, and I know the applicant's representative is here tonight too, so I just wanted to provide that context.
Great, thank you. Board members, any conflicts or disclosures on this item before we begin? All right, and with that, we'll turn it over to the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Drew Gagnon with Coral Palmer, representing the applicant BAS Holdings Company, LLC. And I believe I just pulled up just a quick presentation, just a few graphics to accompany me at the podium here. So as Charles mentioned, this is a petition for a zoning map amendment request for 2 parcels along Flag Pond Road. This is lot 12-2 and lot 13, both totaling about 60 acres. And this is a snippet from the City of Saco GIS, just outlining the 2 parcels that are in question. So this gray line here is I-95, and this is Flag Pond Road, and Route 1 is just off the snippet just to the right over here. So these are the parcels that we are requesting. The parcels are currently in industrial zoning district, and we're requesting an amendment to the Portland Road district. The primary request is because the applicant's evaluating a mixed-use development on these parcels, and mixed-use development does fall and is an approved use in the Portland Road zoning district. So I'll start off by saying at this time that the applicant doesn't have any development plans solidified. There was some stuff put in the application package from just a density calculation, which was the number of condos that was referenced earlier, as well as a few graphics just showing what an industrial development may look like and what a mixed-use development may look like. Those are not solidified plans. Those are not what the applicant is proposing. That was just intended to show for environmental constraints. So I did want to just note that there are no solidified plans right now for this. And this was all mentioned in the application package that was provided before you, but I just wanted to mention a couple of the justification that we have for this rezone request. So location and connectivity was one of the big things. All the parcels along Flag Pond Road are residential in nature right now. The infrastructure, including roadways along Flag Pond Road, doesn't support industrial programming. So Flag Pond would need significant upgrades to be able to support some sort of industrial design or industrial load of traffic. Obviously, that's associated with heavier truck usage. So again, that roadway would look a lot different if under the current zoning an industrial use was going into this parcel. In terms of environmental constraints, so this is a map that, so this is a wetland delineation has been done on the parcel. You can see the black line are the 2 parcels outlined here. Cascade Brook traverses the site in the rear. And then this hatch is all wetlands that have been delineated on site. So basically what my point here is there's significant wetland complexes on this lot with pockets of upland areas, and you can kind of see these pockets here. And this industrial programs require, I just mentioned this, large building and parking areas for truck movements, whether that's deliveries or turning movements, large, big buildings in big impervious areas. Smaller footprint buildings with interconnected access drives, such as planned residential communities, mixed-use development communities, better suit a site that has limited upland area, and that was supported with the 2 figures that were in your application package. That was just simply to show an analysis from a wetland and environmental standpoint, what could be possible and why this site is better suited for a mixed-use development zone rather than an industrial zone, again, given the environmental constraints. Utility infrastructure, so water and sewer would be brought to the site upon any development moving forward here. That would be to support increased housing and mixed-use density. This is, again, in line with the state of Maine's goals in order to try to get housing, specifically in York County, but also in Cumberland and across the state. I won't go into the housing studies that everyone's aware of, but certainly there's a housing need in the state. And then in terms of the comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2022, the updated one, a few highlights here and how the rezone would meet the intent of the comprehensive plan. Expanding economic opportunity, so a mixed-use development supports this. That's in terms of both the residential nature, but also the commercial aspect that would be part of a mixed-use development. Providing a variety of housing options. Again, this could include residential typologies and unit mixes within the PR zone site, so not necessarily one unit type. It could be single-family, multifamily, again, within the zoning parameters, or attached housing, detached housing. So again, the different typologies that residential supports and the Portland Road Zoning District supports. A connected mobility system. This is much more possible when you have a planned residential community with streets rather than a large industrial site that would really only have one primary mobility system, and that would be large truck traffic, right? And then grow our environmental stewardship. So again, I mentioned the discrepancy between industrial zoned sites and how they need that large footprint, and really not able to work around wetlands as well. So again, kind of supporting that. This zone change would definitely better suit the type of development to lessen wetland impacts and natural resource impacts on this site. And then lastly, before I turn back to the board, a future land use map in the comp plan. So this is pulled exactly from the comprehensive plan. And it appears these flag pond parcels, so the ones owned by BAS Holdings, are one of two, so the other one being the True Tractor Guys LLC parcel, which is just in front, would be the only parcels not in corridor transformation east of I-95 along Flag Pond Road. Again, so this is the only business and industrial future land use parcel east of I-95 on Flag Pond Road that actually has access to Flag Pond Road. So it doesn't really make sense why this was ever drawn this way. Again, it doesn't really make sense that it's an industrial zone land. It's not the best and highest use for the site. I think some of the intentions from what I heard from the council meeting last night, as well as just talking with staff, is the connection to the industrial park a little bit further south in Saco. And again, with Cascade Brook cutting through the site, that's not really possible. I think that may have been the intent years ago when this parcel was selected to be industrial zoned. Again, with a little bit of natural resource due diligence, it's just not possible for that, and you're essentially forcing industrial traffic onto Flag Pond Road, where we think would be better suited for mixed-use development. So with that said, I will turn it back to the board, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I understand this is on application completeness review tonight, and as Charles mentioned, this would be going back to the City Council for further discussion and review. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant regarding application of completeness on this item this evening? Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hi, Drew. So if I understand your proposal correctly, the lots 12, 2, and 13, they go back pretty far from Flag Pond Road, but there's also that little lot that's industrial, zoned industrial right up, that's that one right there.
Correct.
Is that the lot that you indicated BAS is also acquired?
No, they have not acquired that. They actually sold that to Two Tractor Guys LLC some years ago. So.
Okay. And if the council were to rezone this, this land, that would essentially make the other industrial zoned land around it not have access to the Flag Pond Road, right? Unless they could find some other access to Route 1 or Flag Pond Road or somehow, right? I mean, those other lots would be, industrial lots would be landlocked.
Yeah, and I think this backwards L-shaped one is the one you're referring to. The ones behind it are, I think, do have access to Route 1 on the other side. They're also long and linear. As part of a development program, I think this was written in our application, whatever happens, some sort of access could be provided towards Flag Pond Road. Obviously, we can't control other properties requesting zone change or stuff like that, but access would be provided. I mean, it's landlocked today, regardless of what's happening, right? So, but to answer your question, yes. So.
And is the only land that, that seems decent for being developed, is that section that you, in your proposal, you had shown either where a couple of industrial buildings would be, or residential or mixed-use development would be, but the rest of the lot, is it your understanding or your belief that the rest of the lot is so wet that it should not be developed at all? Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. I think the primary focus area can be in the uplands areas, and you can certainly cross wetlands with access roads and intentionally and get it permitted to do that. It's obviously difficult, and you have to prove that there's no other viable options. You have to go through that whole process. My point with that industrial concept was that it chews up a big footprint, and this is the largest, kind of this white space here is the largest upland area on the site. So I guess, theoretically, you could have additional either industrial sites or mixed-use sites further behind there. It's just you'd have to cross wetlands and streams to get there. So the primary upland use is certainly located right here, which makes the most sense from what the delineation shows.
That's, thank you, that's very helpful. And just for the board, I mean, my sense is I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea to recommend the zone be changed. And we'll get into that more, I guess, as we start really reviewing the proposal, but in terms of application completeness, the proposal that's been put forth looks like it, for lack of a better phrase, checks off the boxes of the sorts of information that we would need to be able to make a recommendation to the city council. So it would seem to me that the application is complete, but I'd love to hear what other board members have to say.
Thank you, Jim. Any other thoughts or questions? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Drew, obviously, we look at this map and the upland area is to the north, abutting the turnpike. And that's where the focus of all of your proposed prospective possible development would be. For board members, I start to say, does that really make sense to expand residential use and let them abut the turnpike? I mean, we talk about compatibility of uses, we talk about buffering, and anybody who's driven down the turnpike, this land was harvested just a few years ago, and there's basically no vegetation between the turnpike boundary fence and this upland that they're talking about. The second question that I have, Drew, is that you said that this industrial land is essentially landlocked, or is landlocked, and that's not exactly true. In your opinion, the city cannot cross Cascade Brook, but this is contiguous industrial park land all the way to the Spring Hill section, correct?
Correct, yeah, the industrial does go by. And I just to clarify, it's possible to cross Cascade Brook. I don't think
Correct.
It's not impossible. It's certainly difficult, but yes.
Exactly. It's extremely difficult. It's one of the reasons why we haven't had a chance to have some of this development, but it's not impossible. And it is not landlocked in any way because it is contiguous to our existing industrial park as it is currently zoned, correct?
Correct. The landlocked term, I think, was referring to this parcel here if the rezone were to happen, in terms of landlocked, in terms of access to a roadway, I guess is what the reference was to. It was not towards a zoning district.
And to go a little further, does it make sense you're requesting that we rezone this to the Portland Road District? I'm assuming it's because we have some caveats in the Portland Road District that seem appealing to the people you're representing. But does it seem awkward to you to be rezoning something called in the Portland Road District that doesn't access the Portland Road or doesn't front on the Portland Road?
Not necessarily. I think Portland Road, again, one parcel is in between the Portland Road zoning and what this request for Portland Road and these parcels would be. I think the nature behind it is certainly understanding that just residential development, sometimes accompanied with commercial development, can have a use that meets all the different comprehensive plans in terms of walkability, in terms of limiting traffic off-site if you have some of the amenities or other commercial spaces on the site. So I think the intent was that this site specifically seemed like the best use for it was under the Portland Road zoning district. So I don't think the relationship, again, it's a few hundred feet from the edge of the Portland Road zoning district, that was the intent, was the mixed-use nature of it.
Okay. That's kind of what I have for questions, Mr. Chair. I too concur with Jim. You know, as far as application completeness, I believe they have presented enough material for us to find it complete. I believe that there's much more discussion to be had from this board before we make a an opinion to council. There's several different things I'd like to talk about in the context of that, but we could probably hear what the rest of the board members have, and then we could vote on completeness.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts or questions from board members?
I guess just to clarify, Drew, what we're seeing here on the screen, the pink shaded areas are Portland Road District. So the house lots along Flag Pond Road between here and quite a ways closer to Portland Road are actually in the low-density residential district.
Correct.
Have you analyzed what the possible uses of this property would be if it was rezoned to LDR?
We have not, but again, my understanding is, and off the top of my head, I don't think LDR supports mixed-use developments to the point of Portland Road zoning, so I'd refer back to that. We haven't specifically explored LDR, again, based on the mixed-use nature of what the applicant is seeing out of this parcel.
Sure. Yeah, just curious as to whether we're seeing all the potential uses of the property, but I understand what you're getting at, and of course I can see the zoning on this map. So.
Great, thank you, Joyce. Any other thoughts from board members? Questions? I agree with Jim and Jeff. I think the application is sufficient to continue review and deliberation. So I agree there'll be plenty to talk about after. But yeah, Charles, real quick, with a zoning map amendment, we find the application complete, just as a reminder. Is there a public hearing? There is, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
there will be a public hearing scheduled. It has slightly different noticing requirements in state law and in our ordinance, timing and abutters, but we'll handle that. You do have to have a public hearing, and I also believe council will have a public hearing as well.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yeah, so I think,
Remind-
and regardless of the recommendation of the planning board, whether for or against or indifferent, it will go back to council.
Correct, yeah. That's all I had.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we find the application complete.
I would second that motion.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion on the motion to find the application complete? All right, those in favor, Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 6-0. So with that, Charles, do we have room on a future agenda here that we could hold a public hearing on this item?
Yes, the April 7th meeting.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we schedule a public hearing in this matter for April 7th.
I'll second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Joyce. Any additional discussion on the motion to schedule a public hearing for this item on April 7th? All right, those in favor, Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 6-0 to hold a public hearing on April 7th. Great, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, continuing along, our next item on our agenda this evening is item 6B. This is an application of completeness for preliminary subdivision and site plan for a 18-lot single-family subdivision on Easy Street. This is map 44, lot 17-1. And with that, any additional items or anything new on this one, Charles?
No, nothing that's not in the memo, and I know we're looking this for completeness. I think there's a lot of questions that we're still looking for, as the site is in a peculiar spot as it relates to the city. So there's a lot of ongoing conversations behind the scenes, coordination with Old Orchard Beach to make sure that we have the right information from their planning department and Public Works. Those questions will come up during this application. I do not have some of those answers tonight. But we will, work towards it, and if there's any questions that you have for staff because of where this site is located, just, ask them, and I can try to get an answer as soon as possible.
All right, great, thank you. Board members, any conflicts or disclosures on this item before we begin? All right, and with that, we have the applicant with us this evening. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Austin Fagan. I'm here with BH2M, filling in for Andy Morrill. And we are here representing Kevin and Stephen Bollier for the Easy Street, as it's shown on the plan, called Eastern Trail Estates 2. As Charles brought up, this is a bit of a unique situation, as Eastern Trail 1 was a subdivision in Old Orchard Beach that was permitted, I think, about 6 years ago now, and it's been fully built out. There is access to this site from one of the now public roadways that was part of Eastern Trail 1, which is Mary's Way, which you'd see on the right-hand side of the page. So that road leads from Ross Road into the site. As I stated, it is now a public roadway. And the intent of this subdivision would be to be a small extension of Mary's Way and the creation of Bollier Road, which would loop from Mary's Way back down through the subject parcel, through an existing easement on the St. Louis property, as you may see on the lower left portion of the plan. And that would tie back into Ross Road, would make a loop road, which would get us out of the dead-end road length requirements from what I understand. This is an 18-lot subdivision that is proposed to be a road that will be taken by the city. It'll be served by public water and private septic systems. We have received comments from both staff and the third-party review engineers. There was really nothing groundbreaking in those reviews. There were a few things for board discussion that I saw in the city engineer memo, including the need for high-intensity soils potentially. As you folks know, when we submit HHE 200 forms or we're going for private septic systems, we do have to provide the board and staff with preliminary septic test pits, just showing that we meet limiting factor and that the soils are acceptable for septic systems. And with that being said, there also is public water, so we really don't have to worry about nitrate plumes in terms of getting to septic system or water sources on the property, things of that nature. The project will include one wetland impact, approximately 3,600 square feet. So the project will need Army Corps approval for wetland impacts. There was also a comment in the city engineer's memo about potentially needing site location permitting, which we, in the past, we actually structured this project this way in order to avoid that. The original parcel was over 30 acres. That has since been subdivided and sold out. We are not over the 3-acre threshold for site location development, and we are not proposing over 15 lots on over 30 acres, since the subject parcel is only 15 acres. So the way we see it, it would just be stormwater review, which is delegated authority by the city. A few things that were in the completeness checklist that are still needed, it was saying, were financial and technical capacity. That is something that we did hold out on, just not knowing if there'd be any major changes to the proposed plans. It seems that just based on third-party review comments and city engineer comments that everything's pretty up to par for design. So we can absolutely get the board a copy of financial and technical capacity prior to a preliminary approval. That being said, the applicant did permit and build out the subdivision just to the east of this one, so lower with the Mary's Way. So that is another project that the applicant has already taken care of, so technical capacity should be there. The proposed fire protection, it's my understanding that every subdivision in the city requires sprinkler systems, so that would be our anticipated method of fire suppression, unless there's something else that the fire department would accept that may be more manageable or cost-effective. For homeowners association documents, that's something that we can absolutely get you prior to a preliminary approval. There were covenants and restrictions that were put together for the previous project. As I did mention, we would hope that this roadway would be taken over by city, understanding that there's some caveats with how it'll be taken care of, where it's only accessed through portions of Old Orchard. The applicant and Andy from my office have been in contact with both Old Orchard Beach and city staff here multiple times just to try and work out these details, and it's something that's more or less still in motion. For a landscape plan, we have shown street trees on the plans. You'll see those on the profile sheets, and note 5 on the profile sheet calls out 2.5-inch caliper red and white oaks. If you folks are looking for something more detailed than that, we'd be happy to get it for you as we move through the process. But more or less, the proposal is just for street trees like you may see on some of our past projects. For a lighting plan, there is one light that is proposed currently. That is at the intersection of Mary's Way and the proposed Beaulieu Road. That is a required light. There was a comment in the staff review memo of making sure that we're placing lighting in the exact right locations, and that's something that we will work with both planning and the engineering office on for this one. So if a photometric plan is required for those lights, we'd be happy to get that for you prior to the next submission. And the last item that was needed but not submitted is archaeological and historical sites. As part of our wetland impact permits with the Army Corps of Engineers, we will need to reach out to the Maine Historic Preservation Commission. So in order to get those permits, we'll also be crossing that bridge for archaeological and historical sites. So though there are a few items that are noted on the checklist, we'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have about any outstanding items and hopefully move this project forward. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions or comments for the applicant?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a question about, so what's happening with the conversations about, I'm thinking of, the street maintenance and trash removal?
Yes.
If this is a private road with a homeowners association, are you going to have private trash pickup at each lot? Because there's no dumpster location noted here.
So it is proposed as a public project. It does meet the qualifications for being a public roadway in the city of Saco, so that's really where the conversation on how is this going to be maintained, who's going to be picking up trash, how are we going to be handling mail delivery and things like that. The project has actually been in the pipeline for a few years now, just kicking it back and forth. You folks may have seen it a few times now. And, you know, it is very unique, but in the idea that we are, you know, talking with city staff to try and get this all worked out, it's something that we hope can be, you know, determined during this process and not, you know, maybe we can get through all of the public hearings and comments from everybody while we make these determinations.
Yeah, and Chair, if I may provide a little
Sure.
context too, some of those conversations is just purely logistical in turning like what's the best approach to it. Can city staff handle plowing that road? Does it make sense? And then when I speak about Old Orchard, are we looking to have some sort of coordinated maintenance agreement with them? Because if it is proposed to be accepted, again, that goes to the city council, but it's just knowing how that will function, and we just don't have those answers at this time. But we're looking into it, and we're aware, and trying to figure out, you know, what would be the best way to serve the site if it were to be a public street.
Great, thank you. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like this plan better than when we looked at in a sketch review workshop, now that it's got some connectivity. I'm being very tired of seeing all these dead-end streets being proposed, and it would have been even more problematic, a dead-end street serving Saco residents that came from Orchard Beach. So that's appealing. But at the same time, when hearing you say you'd be offered up for public acceptance, not seeing any, you know, clustered group mailbox location, we would be requiring interior street lighting that would, I think the city's still doing there, because it's an underground subdivision, it's for our ordinance standards. So you'd have underground lighting with a meter pedestal for the city. Is there an easement area that you can provide for that equipment infrastructure so that it could be accepted through city acceptance? I heard you say that there was one streetlight proposed at the intersection of Ross Road, which makes sense, but that is something that's probably coming from Old Orchard Beach's design criteria. And if that's utility mounted, that's obviously outside our jurisdiction, but whatever is within the bounds of the city would then fall under our design criteria for underground lighting. Yeah, I guess the other thing we have to double check, and I respect that, you know, the lots are being served with public water. Is the capacity to, we still need capacity to serve if you do residential fire suppression.
Yep.
And then the limiting factor, like so many of the projects in Saco, the space that's left is very high water table. And at 15 inches, is this one of those projects that has to have the backup proposed site for the subsurface disposal system marked on the plans? I forget what the exact limit is. I thought it was 24 inches, but it might be, is it 24? So yes, so then we would need to have a future secondary disposal system design for each lot.
Yep.
If we could have that mapped out, would be helpful for the application review. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of potential here, and hopefully staff could kind of work out the logistical details. If access is not an issue, then it looks like it could be pretty straightforward, but I'm a little leery of accepting application completeness with that many items kind of missing, and yet I feel bad for the applicant to pursue more if the two towns aren't on the same page as how they can service this city-accepted street. Because that would be my preference, is design it as a city-approved street and offer it up for acceptance where it has the connectivity. Those were the thoughts that I have, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Any other, Jim?
The new access roadway that will be through Saco to go to the Ross Road, is that intended to be built like right away, so that that would be a primary access for the construction of that site?
Yes.
Okay. So that'll be an access point right at the outset. That's very helpful. As Jeff noted, when I was preparing for this, I saw so many different items that either needed more information or that no information had been provided. The financial and technical capacity, I mean, I certainly agree with you that given the Bollier's experience, with other subdivisions, they obviously know how to build a subdivision, but we usually do have like the financial piece, estimated in, so that we know that we're not reviewing something that never ever could be built because there's no money behind it. So I was a little troubled by that, as well as you've addressed, point by point, the missing items, but normally we have all that, at least in a preliminary form. I respect that things change from the moment the application's complete to preliminary, sometimes at final. There are sometimes changes that go along the way. But it seems like there are just a number of items here that haven't been addressed at all. So I'm a little worried about that. I don't know if that's a problem for us, but it certainly stuck out to me as like I didn't understand why we didn't have all that information when, I mean, as you explained from the podium, it sounds like it's not that hard to get. So that was my concern.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Jeff?
Mr. Chair, could we ask staff, there was more information requested on easements, covenants, and deed restrictions. And I know there was a little talk about the corner and the connectivity. Can you tell us what areas you're feeling like you might be missing some of the pie on?
Yeah, and I think some of those are from the conversations with Public Works about how the site will just generally be accessed. We were looking for clarification on specifically kind of the access through Old Orchard Beach, and if there's any other easements on those sites as part of previous subdivisions, other access easements. I think we were just generally looking for a little bit more information about how easements will be, if there's going to be new easements provided, and also some other information for like city easements to access certain parts of the site.
Okay. Does some of that involve like the drainage easements? Would some of their collection system be, oftentimes when they offer the street up for city acceptance, the city's taking over that drainage infrastructure, and Public Works will have to have easement to get in and maintain it possibly. In this particular case, could some of that drainage be servicing roadway that's actually in Old Orchard and is going to drain towards, and then the city is going to be on the hook for maintaining a drainage facility that's actually servicing land that's not in the city, but it's part of your development? Can you explain how some of your flow is there?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So in terms of easements, there's both a 25-foot easement on one side for utilities as well as a 10 on the other. So that would give us spots to put our, which I think you brought up before, for electrical utility services and things like that. In terms of the stormwater, so yes, all of this site is proposed to go to the stormwater pond that was shown on the left-hand side of the page. With that, there's also stormwater that'll be coming from the proposed roadway segment through Old Orchard Beach. So yes, there is a small portion of Old Orchard roadway that would be going to that Saco maintained stormwater BMP. That being said, there's not really many other opportunities to treat stormwater. As you know, we're required to treat up to 95% of the impervious area on the site, as well as 80% of anything that we develop for a vegetated surface. So, trying to get it to one area easier to maintain was the goal with this one, especially where, with a wet pond, we can outlet lower than we can with soil filters and without making it too complicated. So I guess that would be another thing that we'd have to discuss with city staff. The city engineer didn't bring up any concerns with stormwater coming from the old orchard parcel, which is shown in our stormwater review. That being said, it is a great question and something that we can address as we move forward.
Yeah, I guess I was just looking at how far, I don't know if you've done the road profile that's going to be in the Olocha Beach section.
Yes.
To give us a sense of how much distance that we're talking about collecting.
Yeah, there would
And so you said wet pond, so in this case, this pond will be holding water the majority of the time,
Correct.
which then we might want to be thinking about, you know, well, the details on the depth, but also circulation and the mosquito issue that we've talked about on a few other wet ponds. Okay. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to understand, thank you, Charles, for the information about the easements and just trying to figure out why that seemed like it was a hang-up, because easements are usually pretty straightforward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts from board members? So, Austin, the portion of road that goes to Ross Road, is that all pavement as well?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
It'll be built to the same width as the proposed street on the Saco portion.
And that, while Mary's Way exists now, and that's a paved road.
Yep.
In Old Orchard, and that's a city of Old Orchard Beach or town of Old Orchard Beach accepted road.
Correct.
And then same thing for Ross Road. That portion off of Ross Road is not built yet,
Correct.
but that would be, the intent would be to offer that for acceptance with Old Orchard as well, right?
Yes, and that project is currently under review with Jeffrey over at the town of Old Orchard.
Okay. And then I noticed the sidewalk stops at the Saco line.
Yep.
Is that's the intent? It wouldn't continue down the Old Orchard portion of the road?
Correct. So there is it is through the abutters parcel, and there's an opportunity for them to subdivide that property if they'd prefer to. And I believe the applicant's intent is for that to be, if they're going to develop that parcel, then their responsibility for sidewalk on that section.
Okay. Yeah, I think I share the comments from other board members here. I don't think I have anything else specifically to add for application completeness. I think tidying up a few of those items, getting some of that information clarified, I think that'll be a big help. These portions of property that straddles the line and access from the other town, they always are, as you said, Jeff, they're always a little bit tricky. So understanding the big picture in whole is important. Any other thoughts? So you've been making notes, I know, Austin, so you have direction from the board, do you feel, on tidying up a few things for application of completeness? And if the board would like to, Charles, is there a date that we could see this application again and continue completeness review? And if the board wishes to do a public hearing that evening as well?
Yeah, April 7th would be a good time.
April 7th to see this again. Okay. And with that, additionally, does the board want to do a site walk on this property as well? We've seen, like Jeff mentioned, a sketch plan or two on this, but I don't know if we've been out to the site. So those are my final thoughts, I guess. Jim?
Mr. Chair, I think a site walk would be a great idea. I have not been on that site yet, but I think that would be very helpful. I would, and I hope, Austin, you have a good sense of what you're going to need to make the application complete.
Absolutely.
Well then, Mr. Chair, I'll move that we continue application completeness till April 7th, and also have a public hearing scheduled for that night as well.
Thank you for the motion, Jim.
would you possibly consider amending your motion to schedule a public, if we should have time to notify, for notification and do a site walk prior to? Would it be beneficial if we do our site walk prior to the public hearing?
Yes, I think that would be a great idea. So are you suggesting we determine the site plan, the site walk first and then?
I just think if staff has time to do a notification of a site walk between now and April 7th, which I think we have plenty of time, then we would just request that we will schedule a site walk, and either we could do a straw poll and pick a date now before you make the motion, and you could do it all in once, that we'll have a site walk.
Well, let's, sure, why don't we do a straw poll right now on the sidewalk, and then I'll amend my motion to include that.
So just looking at some dates, we should probably aim for after the week of the 17th, and obviously the later the better with the weather. So after the week of the 17th, maybe the 18th, 19th, or 20th, or the 25th, 26th, or 27th.
I would support prior to the 25th. I believe Conservation Commission meets on the 25th. So if we'd like to invite them as well and then have, oh no,
They meet on the
sorry, they 18th.
Yeah, 18th.
Sorry, I misread. 18th.
So if you want to send this to advisory review too, which is another conversation, that would be the 17th. The 17th would be before that date.
So would the morning of the 17th work? Board members? No? 18th?
I can do the 16th or the 18th.
I think the 16th or 18th would be fine for me as well. 18th?
Well, Mr. Chair, then I'll amend my motion to also include a site walk for 8 a.m. March 18th.
I would second that motion.
All right, so motion made by Jim and seconded by Jeff to continue application of completeness review to April 17th and hold a public hearing that evening as well, along with scheduling a site walk for March 18th at 8 a.m. and inviting the Conservation Commission to attend that site walk as well. Does the 18th work for you, Austin?
Absolutely.
Great. Any additional discussion? All right, those in favor. Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 6-0.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
The public hearing is April 7th.
And we'll send out notices to that as well. Chair, point of order, may I ask who seconded that motion?
Jeff? All right, our next item on our agenda this evening is item 6C. This is a continued public hearing and application review for 42 Ferry Road, map 22, lot 34. And this is preliminary subdivision, site plan, and conditional use review for 25 single-family condominium units within the medium-density residential zoning district. Charles, anything to add on this item before we begin?
So this will be the first of this new memo format, so just take note of that. We can talk later if you have any comments or notes on that. But this was designed in a way to be kind of a substitute for findings of fact, so I have prepared findings of fact, but they're based on what's in the memo. The board had requested it and I had missed that, and then the applicant had reminded me today. So I have them drafted, just so you guys are aware, but it's based on the contents of the memo.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions for staff? Any conflicts or disclosures before we begin? All right, with that, we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Craig with Acorn Engineer. I just wanted to start off by summarizing the changes to the plans and the application material since the last planning board meeting. One of the comments we heard from the board was to take a look at the landscaping. So the bulk of the changes that are on the plans are a result of making those changes to the landscape plans. We've softened the perimeter by adding a number of plantings, and we've also responded to the landscape architecture comments. So as far as the plans go, it was really limited to the landscape plans where the bulk of the changes were. The applicant attended a second conservation commission, so now I believe you have their draft memo in your packet. We've also received a number of peer reviews, legal, environmental, hydrogeologic. The environmental and hydrogeologic did not recommend any changes. The legal peer review recommended some minor changes to the condominium association documents, and we are prepared to make those changes as part of the final subdivision packet. We also received and reviewed the traffic peer review comments. That was pretty lengthy. There was a lot of narrative there that went through the history of this area. And at the end of that peer review, there were two recommendations. One of those recommendations was that we extend the sidewalk a little bit east to across the street from Pine Ridge Road, and at that intersection of Ferry Road and Pine Ridge to do a crosswalk and potentially an all-way stop. So there's still some coordination left with the city and the traffic peer review to coordinate whether or not an all-way stop is needed. But the applicant is agreeable to installing that sidewalk to that location and doing a crosswalk. So we're still reviewing the criteria on whether or not an all-way stop, so stop signs for Ferry Road are needed at that intersection. We went out and measured site distance yesterday, and there is adequate site distance looking in the westerly direction, approximately 360 feet. So I did send that information over to the peer reviewer and the planning department today, so there's still some coordination left, but again, the applicant is agreeable to installing that crosswalk at that location and whatever else is needed for that crosswalk, such as signage. So we hope that we can address that as part of the final plan submission for this project. At this time, we don't feel like the other recommendation is would really work well for this project because it does involve a lengthy sidewalk extension to Old Orchard Road. And in reviewing that stretch of Ferry Road, there are a number of trees, retaining walls, and some of the homes are very close to that side of Ferry Road. So the applicant would prefer to install the crosswalk to go across Ferry Road for access to the sidewalk on the south side. There's some discussion tonight with the board that we'd like to have around what you would like to see. I think the peer reviewer is looking for some feedback from the planning board on what your thoughts are. In the planning board memo from the planning department, there were also some comments that the board should weigh in on, such as the open space. And there was a comment brought up about extending the tree survey 10 feet beyond the property line, and the applicant is prepared to do that. I think he did it today, so the next iteration of the plans will show the tree survey. And we'll properly address if any trees need to be removed, working with the landowners. But I don't believe that there were many 24-inch trees that were found on other properties. So with that, we're really hoping for preliminary approval tonight and here to answer any other questions, comments you may have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant? Jim?
I think I mentioned several meetings ago that for about 12 years, I lived at 10 Ferry Road, so I'm pretty familiar with that area. And I agree that running a sidewalk down I guess it would be the eastern side of the Ferry Road to the Old Orchard Road would, I think, create a real problem for a lot of the homeowners there. At least my old house at 10 Ferry Road was very close to the street, as well as the neighbors on either side, and even the house that's right on the edge of the Old Orchard Road. So I really can't see that working, because you'd have these sidewalks literally right outside someone's front door, and while that makes sense downtown, it doesn't make sense on the Ferry Road. So the solution of having, running a much shorter sidewalk, of course, to Pine Ridge Road would seem like a much better solution. And I don't know if you need a three-way stop there, but at least in my experience, three-way stops or four-way stops are remarkably effective at slowing traffic down and controlling how people drive. So whether or not a three-way stop is a good idea there, I don't know. But I know a lot of the residents here who've shown up, many in opposition to this application, have expressed concerns about the traffic speed and so forth. And a three-way stop, if it does get installed there, would fix that problem, I think, quite effectively. So those are my thoughts on the sidewalk issue.
Great, thank you, Jim. Any other thoughts from board members, questions? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Jim, that's really great information, having lived there on that side, because we didn't obviously evaluate that when we did our site walk. Because logically, I would think that, getting people up to the major intersection where it logically looks like there would be an all-way stop anyways, kind of made sense. But when I was thinking of the two proposed applications, the Pine Ridge Road kind of sounds like it would have wins for multiple venues, right? We had several people write in that they felt it was dangerous to cross on that side, and we would be kind of getting to more of a neutral point to let them go to the existing, I always want to call it the bike path, because that's how the Rotary put it in, but it's the sidewalk on the Ferry Road. I don't know, it sounded like there were a few criteria that may have met warrants to allow the DOT to allow that, and I didn't know if one thing made more sense if they decrease the speed, because that was one of the things that was talked about, because I think speed steps up at Ocean Park Road, right? So, or Old Orchard Road, right? That's where the increase is. If we just delayed it a little bit, rather than having an all-way stop, because the all-way stop seems a little bit odd to me, and they talked about the curvature of the road there. And I think that's the sight distance, Craig, that you were kind of referring to, so that oncoming cars would be aware of the all-way stop. Either way, I think that's up to us to kind of hash out. I think it's great that this applicant will be meeting that connectivity requirement that we're striving for to get occupants from this subdivision safely across to the existing sidewalk. So I mean, Charles, where does that work? I mean, we can say, yeah, that's our Pine Ridge Road's our preferred option, but maybe would they consider rather than an all-way stop currently, just decreasing the speed till we got past that point? Is just a thought. Does that go back to traffic committee? And
so this, again, I'll just say first, this didn't go to traffic safety committee. This was a conversation with public works staff, police, planning, and then our traffic peer reviewer. So that's where this information is coming from. We do not send projects to traffic safety committee. And I would say that these are just two general these are the two options for recommendations. How they are completed, I think that's a good option. Whether we look at speed in that area, I think that's possible. And like, how do we put in a sidewalk? I think the big, just to clarify, the big concern from staff is the mid-block crosswalk with no stop sign. I think staff is still firm in that. I hope I provided some of that PDRC clarification. And so this recommendation is asking for an all-way stop. Obviously, I think if we were to go in that direction, we can look at even more options about how we treat a crosswalk at Pine Ridge Road and Ferry Road. I think if that's the preferred direction, we can look at that. It's similar to how the second option is only the sidewalk, and then the city would jump in and look to, advocate for and get an all-way stop at Old Orchard, Beach Street, and Ferry Road. But I think if we have an idea of where, because I think the first thing is the extent of sidewalk, the direction or the extent of sidewalk connection, and then we can look at what would be required of the applicant, whether it's, appropriate traffic calming solutions like speed or, proper signage and all of that. So I think it's hard to look at it right now with just these, I don't want to say general, they're very specific recommendations. But how they would be installed is something that we can really work with the applicant, work with staff, work with our peer reviewers to determine what's the, the safest route for pedestrians.
Okay. I mean, I'm just glad we have two solid options to be discussing, because I feel very strongly we have to make the applicant meet the criteria that the destination is the safety of the sidewalk that exists. We need to get them there safely, whichever way that has to be to get to a crosswalk. I guess we'll have to iron out as a board. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Jeff. Catherine?
I just have a clarifying question, Charles, on that. Because originally the police department had said a hard stop no on the crosswalk. They would be okay with a four-way stop based on the fact that the sight line distance is there?
Yeah, so I think the general consensus of staff was we would be favorable to a crosswalk if there was a stop sign, so not a mid-block crosswalk. So that's why both of these options envision a stop sign in some capacity.
Okay.
Whether the applicant installs it or the city will install it. I think we're just trying to create the safest pedestrian crossing. And, if we look at one, whichever one we do, we'll figure out a path forward as part of as this application moves forward. But I think we just wanted to present these two options so that you can get an idea of where we would be directing the future residents of the site, or where, how they would cross.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Charles. Joyce?
Well, I drive that road every day. And I will say, just as someone who drives that road every day, that you can put a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign there, but people start speeding up after Saco Bay Variety. So I don't think reducing the speed limit solves any. Pam is laughing because she knows. Also, I mean, the practicality of the sidewalk to Old Orchard Road, that house at the corner of Old Orchard Road, which is built on ledge, there's no way someone could put a sidewalk there without removing that house, I would think. Certainly there'd have to be serious blasting being done. And the fact is, too, people leaving this area or leaving Harbor Drive are not going to walk up to Old Orchard Road to cross the road to go back down Ferry Road. They're going to cross the road right here. So if we can make it safer for people to do what they're already doing. People cross the road in the middle of that block all the time. So I think this proposal, which we hadn't even thought of in terms of putting a stop sign there, makes a lot of sense, because people aren't going to slow down along there, but they're going to have to stop at a stop sign.
Great, thank you, Joyce. Jim?
And just one other point on that. I know further down the Ferry Road, I don't know if it's across from Richards Way, or I can't remember. There's the blinking lights with the crosswalk, and in the summer I drive down the Ferry Road quite a bit, and I have to say, as attentive as I like to think I am, sometimes I don't realize someone's trying to cross until I see those lights go off. But that certainly is a great visual way of alerting motorists to pay attention to pedestrians. So in lieu of a three-way stop sign, I think something like that could be effective as well. I don't know how everyone who lives in the houses right near that are going to feel with all these blinking yellow lights all day long, but I think that would be another solution to the problem to the extent that the city or whomever doesn't want to put stop signs there.
Great, thank you, Jim. Any other thoughts? Chris?
Yeah, I just want to say that I second that notion of having maybe some lights that flash versus a stop sign, just because obviously pedestrian safety is a primary concern. But I think another thing to consider would be just the general traffic flow on that road. During the summer, there's a lot of cars going down Ferry Road, and I could easily see a situation where you get a lot more traffic if people are stopping in both directions quite regularly. But another thing to consider is this whole area, I don't think we could ever get a perfect situation just because of the complexity of it. So I think as a board, if we can put forward a solution that significantly improves the existing situation, I think that's a good goal to strive for, but I don't think we'd ever be able to make a perfect situation where we can perfectly balance all the uses and needs of that area.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts from board members? I myself, I agree with a lot of what's been said here. Stop sign on Old Orchard Road makes sense. There's a little bit more traffic there. But bringing the sidewalk up there is, I don't think that's necessary for a lot of the reasons that we spoke about this evening. Another of which we've had similar project where off-site improvements were part of the project, and the amount of time that it takes to do that, I think is unnecessary and sort of overreaching for this particular project. It makes more sense to be at Pine Ridge. As far as a sidewalk, or excuse me, a stop sign, I think that could work. I guess we'll see what the warrants say. Flashing lights, whatever safety measure I guess is deemed most appropriate. I think the stop sign is going to work best. People stop for stop signs and not always for orange, yellow lights. Well, people should stop for stop signs in most cases. I think I agree that that's more appropriate for this particular project. The landscaping, I think, is a good welcomed upgrade. I think the street trees, internal as well, that makes sense to me. I know there's a lot happening in there between the buildings. And Craig, how close are those buildings again to each other?
10
10
feet?
10
12
feet or
feet,
so?
12 feet.
12 feet, okay. So yeah, the grading, and thank you for zooming into that. We can see that topography there. We can see the swales that you've created and how you're directing water in there, and landscaping would be nice, but I think the sacrifice in what it may do to the stormwater there and debris, utilities, I think the plan you've presented works well in that regards. Any other thoughts from board members? I guess we didn't hit landscaping too much, or overall thoughts on the rest of the updates that the applicant presented? Jim?
Chairman, I mean, it looks like this applicant has worked very hard to try to address the myriad of concerns that neighbors had in although we'll have an opportunity to hear more from them tonight. about the latest plan. And I understand that you are asking, the applicant's asking for a waiver of some of the landscaping, which I was trying to understand what that was for, but it looked like it's for landscaping between the buildings. Is that right?
Between the front yards, I believe.
Between the front yards?
I'll let Charles speak to whether or not an official waiver is needed as part of that request.
Yeah, it would be section 188, 711, A6. Just the landscape peer reviewer noted that you use buffering and landscaping to provide privacy in multifamily subdivisions. So that would be in between buildings, and it's a pretty general, up for interpretation standard. But I think in this situation, what that would mean would be putting in these spaces here where there's all that grading and swales.
Right, so it looks like putting landscaping in those areas might be difficult at best and ineffective at worst, right? Because it could interfere with utilities and underground cables and so forth. So I commend the applicant for doing a good job trying to address everyone's concerns, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you, Jim. Jeff?
So my 3 items that I had was, discussing the sidewalk, updating the technical, financial capacity. I guess the estimate for that comes at $1,024,621, and the existing financial capacity was $938,000. And then also had a note about discussing if the 3% open space was sufficient.
Yeah.
Because I believe if it's not, then they have to pay waivers. I was kind of looking at it, and it's kind of this challenge. City's asking for increased density. This is kind of the first model that we see. And ultimately, with all the infrastructure they have to do for stormwater retention, the paved areas for access, the spacing of the houses, there's not much left for any open space. And it's hard because these end up looking like a clear-cut piece of land, right? And it's going to take a while for those trees to mature. Well, the landscape architect and some of us have been serving for a while will see the results in 10 or 12 years. It's hard for others to see what these plantings will look like, or envision what it'll look like when it becomes kind of a more mature neighborhood. But with that said, there isn't really a lot of open space here for residents to utilize or recreate. I mean, it's either buildings or best management practices for the stormwater. So I think that we as a board we're tasked with determining if we felt like the open space being offered was sufficient. So I think that's one thing that we should touch on, and Mr. Chair, and I don't know when you want to address those 3 items, but.
That was a great introduction to beginning that discussion. Any other thoughts or questions from board members? I think the waiver specifically, I'm fine granting a waiver. If Charles thinks it's necessary, I don't think it's necessary. While it is multiple buildings on the property, they're all single family, so I don't really see it as multifamily between multifamily buildings. But if that's Charles' recommendation, I would accept that.
Well, just to note, it's also coming from the landscape peer reviewer.
Sure. We do want landscaping. We don't want it to look clear-cut, of course. So I think street trees are a good compromise. Anyway, Jim.
Just 2 things. Thank you, Jeff, for mentioning that financial piece, because I noticed that too, and I had meant to say something about it. So I'm sure that won't be difficult to go and get an upgraded letter of credit or demonstration of financial ability. On the open space question, I've thought about this a lot. I mean, I think it's unique and helpful that there's going to be a pool there with a pool house, and the residents of that lot will, I'm sure, enjoy that for the 3 months of the year that they can use it. And I know that sounded like I was being sarcastic, but I wasn't. I mean, it's, you know, kids love pools, and that can be a wonderful summer resource for people in that pool. In my mind, helps out the open space issue a great deal. I think that they've done enough with respect to this proposal, so right now I'm not convinced that they need to contribute funds to the city for more open space, but maybe other board members feel differently. I'd be interested to hear what other people think.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Jeff?
So with regards to open space, Jim, you kind of, touched upon it, right? They have some interior recreation space. I think the bigger thing is that if we don't ask them to pay an impact fee and they are putting that on-site or off-site sidewalk connectivity so that they can get over to Laurel Hill Cemetery. I know, and it's not always the best idea to think of something that's off-site. I mean, it's not like a city park, but essentially it's not going to be developed for perpetuity, right? It's a cemetery, and it has a very big draw. I mean, there are several people that live miles away that will go there to walk, and that truly serves a lot of Saco as a recreation and a true open space for multiple activities, whether people are meditating or walking or when the tulips pop up or whatever the flowers are, I guess, but it's a big draw. So where they're doing that off-site improvement, I'm feeling like they're allowing that access to some amenities that are close by. They're definitely walking distance. So I guess I, too, in that regard, because it's so close and because they're doing that connectivity piece to allow it, it's kind of a lot to ask, pay an impact fee for open space and put the sidewalk in it. I think I would be in support of waiving that open space fee. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts? Joyce?
Yeah, I guess I'd agree with that. Although I would point out, I mean, Laurel Hill is open, but you can't ride bikes, skateboard, you can't bring your dog. But you can walk your dog and ride your bike on the bike path or near the bike path. So they're certainly providing access to recreational activities, and they have outdoor recreation right on the property. So I agree with that waiver, but slightly correcting the Laurel Hill as a park concept.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. But I think so often we as a board they offer us open space, which is the wetlands they can't do anything with. That's what they're offering in all these subdivisions. And you just pointed out that we need to be paying attention to forms of recreation where there's some activity. And this particular site does not have it on the site. There is access to those close by with the bike path, sidewalk, as well as the cemetery. And I think across the street is held from Laurel Hill, but they kind of, some youth football, they play and practice in that directly across from the field, directly across from the cemetery, right? I think people do use their little recreation there, right? Little pickup baseball games and stuff, so, yeah.
Jim?
No.
Catherine?
I was going to say that I agree, and thank you for pointing out Laurel Hills right there. There are also walking paths back off Richards Way and Ocean Greens that go back behind the neighborhood. So I think in that specific area, there is a lot of access to other outdoor activities along with the pool. And there are upgrades that are happening outside the borders of the property that I think are really valuable to more than just that neighborhood in the area. So I agree.
Soccer field on Richards Way, too. I think that's a city soccer field.
Jim, do you have another thought?
Well, I was just going to, I'm glad Jeff brought up Laurel Hill Cemetery, and Joyce did too. And when I lived at 10 Ferry Road, we considered Laurel Hill as our private park. I mean, we would go over there, we'd cross the street carefully, and but we would enjoy just walking through there. It's a fabulous spot, and it's daffodils, I think, that come up. But it was always a joy to be there. So all the folks in that neighborhood, I think, will enjoy that, and I think that was a good point to bring that up.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts from board members? Questions?
Mr. Chair, is this, I believe this is a continued public hearing?
Yes, sir.
And if so, I'll move to reopen the public hearing.
I will second that.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Jeff. Any additional discussion on the motion to reopen the public hearing? All right, those in favor, Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 6-0. If anyone is with us this evening that would like to speak on this item, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. I guess we've continued the public hearing on this item this evening. We have a lot of written comment. We've heard quite a bit of testimony here. So we'd be interested to hear comments and neighbors' feedback on some of this new, the new information that we have. So if anyone would like to come on up, go ahead.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. My name is Maggie Mondak, 29B Old Orchard Road. I'm a direct abutter to 42 Ferry Road. Stormwater and flooding. The 3.7-acre wooded lot at 42 Ferry currently serves as a critical wildlife corridor and a natural filter for the spring-fed pond at 29A and 29B Old Orchard Road, converting the steep slope habitat into a dense grid of roofs and roads will displace local wildlife and degrade our pond's water quality through untreated runoff and thermal pollution. More critically, the pipes to pond drainage strategy ignores our neighborhood's topography. Our properties already sit underwater for days after big storm events. The National Wetlands Inventory shows 4 acres of connected freshwater wetland and pond immediately downslope of 42 Ferry. This is a real wetland habitat. Fish, frogs, baby ducks, baby turkeys, families of great blue herons. This is not a drainage ditch. The trust us, the model says it's fine is not sufficient proof nor legal substitute for a hydrologic analysis that actually evaluates that mapped wetland basin and the existing flooding on our properties. The plans still do not accurately show or analyze the spring-fed pond and driveway at 29B Old Orchard Road and how multiple outfalls and overflows aimed directly at our house will behave in major storms. If those features are not honestly on the plans, this board cannot make the required findings on stormwater, wildlife habitat, or protection of adjacent properties. I also request that mature trees be planted along the full length of our shared boundary. Mature trees will aid water absorption and shield our private yard and driveway from 42 Ferry residents whose homes will sit above us on a roughly 10% slope. The R-Pod, Seal Rock Spring, and the aquifer, our neighbors have provided substantial evidence that the Seal Rock Spring source is at 32 Ferry Road. A prudent and reasonable person would not look at the historical evidence and conclude otherwise. Approving dense development, blasting, and large infiltration structures without first requiring a professional hydrogeologic study to precisely locate the spring is not compatible with RPOD standards. It is guesswork over a mapped wetland system. Buffers and green space. This plan develops roughly 95% of the site, pushes grading right to the property lines, and leaves buffers as narrow as 10 feet. Our ordinances require more meaningful natural buffers, green strips, and screening to protect neighboring yards, wildlife corridors, and privacy. Replacing a mature mixed forest slope and continuous wildlife corridor with that kind of edge treatment does not meet standards. The Conservation Commission agrees and has recommended that a real green corridor be integrated into the plan. As a mother, the pool would not help me out as far as recreation for kids. It would be an additional source of worry for me. Not everyone knows how to swim, and kids certainly can't swim without supervision. It would not help me out at all. I ask you to please hold judgment on this application until the tree survey along and at least 10 feet beyond the property line is complete, all trees, because I am deeply concerned that excavation and grading will kill not only the trees on the line, but those near it and on our side of the property. Meanwhile, our house, which arguably should never have been built in such a wet location, sits just feet from the 42 Ferry property line. Our daily lives will change significantly with high-density construction this close to our living quarters. This is our one and only home. We have nowhere else to go. I worry about the health and stress on all abutters who must constantly fight to not be taken advantage of by the developer while managing such a dramatic transformation with such a minimal buffer. Traffic and pedestrian safety. The Beach Ferry Old Orchard Road intersection is a high conflict, high crash location. Any legally sound approval must address the need for a 25-mile-per-hour speed zone and a signalized crossing. Without these, the board is choosing to shift foreseeable injury risks onto our neighborhood and our school children, and the state has already suffered 2 heartbreaking bus tragedies this year. As one of the board mentioned this evening, it's a tricky location. So why again do we want this drastic density in this specific location? The answer is we don't. Wrapping up, the ordinances use shall for a reason. The board cannot legally approve this application unless the applicant first fully maps and analyzes the buildings, spring-fed pond, wetlands, and existing flooding within 200 feet along the full border, and provides a professional hydrologic and hydrogeologic study of the aquifer and RPOD resources, and redesigns stormwaters and buffers so that they do not use the mapped wetland basin and our driveway as the de facto emergency overflow. Until those mandatory standards are met, I respectfully ask you to deny or at least table this application. Thank you for your time and for protecting the existing residents and conditions in this neighborhood.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Georgia Bell, and I live at 29A Old Orchard Road. Over the course of this review process, there have been ongoing questions raised regarding the stormwater management and the environmental impact of this proposed housing development at 42 Ferry Road. At the February 18th Conservation Commission meeting, the Commission once again requested clarification of pre- and post-development stormwater flow comparisons, and once again did not get a sufficient response from Acorn Engineering, as Mr. Burgess was not present at this meeting. Mr. Labonte, who was present, was unable to answer that question. During this meeting, there was significant discussion regarding the location of Seal Rock Springs, the adjacent freshwater pond, and the surrounding wetlands and watershed area. A question was raised regarding groundwater levels on the building lot. Mr. Labonte responded by saying that all the 4 test pits didn't encounter any groundwater at the 8-foot depth. But according to a letter dated May 21st, 2025, by Mark Harmon, soil scientist, Test pit number 2 encountered water at 36 inches, and test pit number 4 encountered water at 84 inches. The site plan that was displayed during the meeting didn't include existing physical features within 200 feet of the building site. If the applicant had complied with the city code, chapter 230, section 1404E12, a site plan would have been available for the commissioners to view and appreciate the proximity of the spring-fed pond, the surrounding freshwater wetlands, and the woodlands. These freshwater wetlands and the pond are both depicted on the National Wetland Inventory map and protected under the National Resource Protection Act, NERPA. According to Maine DEP website, NERPA permits are required for certain activities that occur in, on, or over protected natural resource area or on land adjacent to a great pond, river, stream, or brook, coastal wetlands, and some freshwater wetlands. Maine DEP Chapter 310, Section 3A, under definitions, defines adjacent to a protected natural resource as an area within 75 feet measured horizontally of the normal high water line of a great pond, river, stream, or brook, or upland edge of a coastal wetland or freshwater wetland. In review of the developer's application, I found no mention of a NERPA permit and wonder why this hasn't been addressed yet. One of the commissioners asked Mr. Lamonti if the stormwater design in these site plans used guidelines for 100-year storm events. Mr. Lamonti replied that the city of Saco doesn't require it. On February 20th, a front page headline of the Portland Press Herald read, "Maine Forest Service urges loggers, adapt to extreme weather." In this article, it states that the Maine Forest Service has issued guidance to help state loggers, foresters, and woodlot owners navigate the new era of extreme weather. This guidebook warns extreme weather events aren't just more frequent and more severe, but inevitable. It also writes, winter is Maine's fastest warming season, with average winter temperatures rising about twice as fast as summer temperatures. It goes on to say, with warmer winters comes more frequent and ferocious storms. The extreme storms that severely flooded my property for 2 weeks occurred when we had back-to-back rainstorms on January 10th and 13th of 2024. According to the Northeast Regional Climate Center at Cornell University, so-called 100-year storm events in New England are occurring far more frequently, up to twice as often, and the region has experienced a 60% increase in precipitation. Rainfall amounts for York County used by Acorn Engineering in their calculations of their stormwater management reports were derived from this Northeast Regional Climate Center. This leads me to ask the board, when were the stormwater standards currently being relied upon last updated? If these guidelines do not reflect current data or future climate projections, how can we be confident that our homes and our properties will be protected from contaminated stormwater runoff by a dense housing complex of this scale? Relying on outdated standards in a rapidly changing climate puts abutting properties and my property at serious risks. On a revised site plan map labeled C31, it depicts a shallow swell along the northwest border of the property. This swell was constructed to direct contaminated overflow from Infiltration Basin 2 towards the northwest corner of the property, which is the lowest elevation point of this property. At this location, there's also a plunge pool and an outlet pipe. Discharge of the runoff will be directed back onto the abutter's property in the rear. The applicant notes that there is an existing drainage swale off the rear of the building lot that will supposedly capture this runoff and direct it eastward towards the wetlands. But if you look closely at the topography of the northwest corner, the land slopes westwardly towards the abutter at 29B Old Orchard Road. Once this runoff flows out of this discharge pipe, it will flow downhill with gravity, not several feet straight ahead into this natural drainage swale. The planning board has previously acknowledged that the flooding occurring on our properties is directly related to the driveway at 29B Old Orchard Road, which obstructs the natural outflow of the pond. This has been discussed during the December 12th site walk and again at the January 20th planning board meeting. At that time, Mr. Muller, which I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, is it?
That's just right.
Perfect, thank you. Stated that the driveway could have used 2 culverts beneath it to allow for proper drainage. Mr. Labonte had also acknowledged the flooding issue and privately proposed installing a culvert as a mitigation measure. These statements make it clear that the cause of the flooding is not speculative. It has been identified and discussed on record. When the original application to construct the home at 29B Old Orchard Road was reviewed years ago, it should not have been approved without adequate drainage infrastructure or a comprehensive mitigation plan. However, it was approved by the city of Saco. And then the consequences of this decision are now being experienced by the surrounding homeowners. We are dealing with flooding over the driveway, overflow from the pond into our backyards, and water reaching uncomfortably close to my own home. This is an ongoing and documented issue. I respectfully ask the board not to repeat this mistake by approving a dense housing complex in an area where drainage problems already exist, unless substantial modification to the proposed plans are made to ensure that the situation is not worsened for the abutting property owners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Andrew Mondak, 29 Old Orchard Road. Something that's been mentioned during this whole process by the applicant and board members, people of the public, given the current conditions on and around this site, as has been said, my home probably should not have been built where it is. I've never suggested that this to be the responsibility of the applicant, but it is the responsibility of this board and the city. The city approved the construction of our home. Having done so, the city is now responsible for ensuring the protection of our property when it considers new development that will affect us. I understand the stormwater system has been modeled in HydroCAD and that the applicant's engineers say post-development peak flow will not exceed pre-development flows, but I've not been convinced that these systems will operate flawlessly to keep my family safe over the long term. The stormwater modeling does not account for the intensifying storms that human-accelerated climate change is already delivering to Maine, storms that increasingly exceed the 50-year design event. Modeling past a 50-year event is not required, even though we are now seeing 100-year events more and more often. And these systems, infiltration basins, under-drain soil filters, drip line filters, they depend heavily on consistent ongoing maintenance. And unfortunately, we all know how well humans are at upkeep and maintenance of our infrastructure. I ask this board not to approve the plan that only meets the bare minimum standard. I ask that you require a more robust margin of safety because it will be the city, ultimately, not the applicant, that is responsible for the unreasonable risk placed on our home and for any future damages that result once the project is complete. Now, I do want to express gratitude to the applicant and the Conservation Commission The applicant updated the plans to show the proposed tree line along our shared boundary, and they agreed to do the expanded tree survey to all the trees that will be affected by the earthworks and the backfilling within the critical root zones of boundary trees that can be damaged on the neighboring properties as well as the boundary. I really do appreciate that they are looking at that aspect, because any tree that's left behind might just fall later once there's no other trees around it that help it out, or once the root systems are damaged. And this is especially relevant since the 90+% of the land is going to be touched by heavy construction. Even the Conservation Commission recognized that they function as significant water absorbers and carbon sinks, so protecting them is also protecting us. I also want to thank the Conservation Commission for their thoughtful February 18th advisory review. Their recommendations are exactly the kind of long-term thinking that this project needs. They also call for more careful evaluation of all off-site stormwater impacts that my neighbors have been talking about, making sure we have as much information as possible for the board in order to make a decision. And particularly, the concerns raised about protecting the Seal Rock Spring and the adjacent freshwater wetlands. The Commission specifically questioned whether the BMPs will perform during high-intensity storms and asked for continued clarification of pre- and post-development flow rates. Most importantly, the Conservation Commission discussed the site's current role in supporting wildlife movement and ecological connectivity. They encouraged the applicant to explore design elements such as enhanced green buffer areas, kind of like a greenway integrated into the plan. That could maintain or replace the habitat corridors this development will destroy. I urge this board to adopt that recommendation in full and request this of the proposal. More meaningful green space would not only benefit wildlife and ecological function, but it'll also provide a critical additional layer of stormwater absorption, compensation for the lack of meaningful open space mentioned by Mr. Brochu, and it'll help temper the risks that the current plan is asking my family to accept. And that brings me to final point. I urge you to ask the applicant to reduce the project's density. 25 units on 3.7 acres with 95% of the parcel disturbed leaves almost nothing for true green space, meaningful buffers, or system redundancy, basically. A reasonable reduction in density would allow wider buffers along property boundaries, more room for stormwater infrastructure to exceed minimum standards, space for wildlife corridors your Conservation Commission has requested, and a development that fits more comfortably with the character of Ferry Road. The applicant will still realize substantial profit in the millions with a meaningful, just reasonable reduction in the density. The city will still gain meaningful new tax revenue. Everything can work together. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Planning Board members. I'm David Rewinkle, 32 Ferry Road. I don't have a lot today, so I'm going to dive right into it, and picking up from where we left off on January 20th. City staff and Planning Board members seem to have concluded that the most recently identified Seal Rock Spring location, which is shown in some of the documents that have been populated over the last several weeks. They're saying it's 400 feet north of 42 Ferry parcel, the brick ruin that we've been referring to. This is the 1960s era location of the pump house, pumping it up to Old Orchard Road. So it seems that members and Planning Board believe that that is the one and only spring location, and we've talked about this potentially being more than one location. There is no dispute from us, from the abutters either, about the Dow and Coulomb survey marking a spring. There was definitely a spring there. There's evidence of it right on the ground. So at the last planning board meeting on January 20th, Member Brochu said that, and I quote, "The public has brought forth the notion that there may have been an amendment or an alteration, but the only factual real document that we have is the Dow and Coulomb survey. Because how accurate are some of these distances back in those days?" End quote. And that's a fair question. But when there are multiple pieces of evidence that point to 32 Ferry Road, it seems clear that the next step would be not to dismiss that, but rather to investigate it further. That's one of the things that we've been asking for. So it is discouraging that at one of the last couple of planning board meetings, that a planning board member actually dismissed our historical evidence right here in the chamber, saying, and I quote, "just some newspaper article," during the hearing. So, board members, are you certain, absolutely certain, that the original spring is not at 32 Ferry? Can you be certain of that fact? At the last planning board meeting on January 20th, Mr. Brochu again said that he was not sure. He went on to say that, and I quote, "The aquifer could have had multiple heads, but we haven't been provided proof. The city should be seeking that proof since there is no consensus. There is no smoking gun here. Unfortunately, we wish that there were. So you do at least have some objective proof in the form of our historic evidence that we've provided and put a lot of time and energy into finding. That includes historic photographs. We've submitted historic photographs. We've submitted U.S. Department of the Interior, U.S. Geological Survey. That's definitely not, that's not just a distraction. That's real. And we will gladly give the city access to our land if that will help. We've never said no to that. But please note that no one at the city has ever asked us for that access. If the city won't take advantage of the facts and evidence, what happens in the scenario where later we find out for sure that Seal Rock Spring is actually on our land, that it should have been protected, but only after work at 42 Ferry Road has begun or completed, and more money has been spent by the applicant. Everyone, including those in Augusta, will know that the city of Saco, on your watch, had every opportunity to find out, but chose not to take action. Further review should be required. My wife and I deserve to know once and for all how we can use our land. If we were to proceed and impact certain areas as allowed currently, if there were no spring, but later there were discoveries related to Seal Rock Spring on our land, will the city and state give us a free pass because Saco failed to look into this? Will the city and state take responsibility then? So circling back to something about the runoff issue. At the last meeting for 32 Ferry Road, it seems like I'm picking on Mr. Brochu. I assure you that I'm not. But he said, the big one is stormwater runoff. So this is obviously important. Mr. Burgess was questioned by board members about the public comments regarding runoff into the swale and pond at the northeastern corner of 42 Ferry Road. We all stood there together a couple times in the last few months. He said that, and I quote, "Water discharges through the 4-inch pipe and goes into the swale and on into the pond." So we're all acknowledging that water is flowing off that corner, and just that corner along that stretch. And it is flowing in at the rates desired, hopefully, through the BMP. But there's an exception here, and I think this is an important one. When there are intense storms, there is an overflow, right? So that means it's not going through that filter and taking 24, 36, 48 hours, however long as it takes. It's just going out. And it's flowing into the swale and into the pond. And if we're in situations like Miss Bell described, where a couple of years ago she had horrific storms and it took 2 weeks for that water to recede, that's a real problem. So Mr. Burgess says there will be less water leaving the abutter property than there would have been without the BMP. Once again, we don't dispute that. Less water may be flowing out as a whole on that side of the property. But back again to everybody's favorite word, my favorite word at least, is this concentration of flow. So if there is a concentration of flow, since all the water is being captured along our, I guess it would be the 42 Ferries western side, that whole portion that abuts to my property, that is not flowing off there. It is being captured and is being routed to that corner so that when it's trickling out, it's no problem, right? This isn't like the sky is falling in every situation here. If it's not a lot of rain, it's going to be trickling out and there's not going to be any issues. But it's in the large storm situations where it will overflow and therefore send not just the water, but pollutants as well directly onto our land, which doesn't seem even legal, and then into a wetland, and which leads right into this spring-fed pond. So it's not the smaller events that we're concerned with. So that's the gist, that's the most of it. I just have a couple of additional points that I'm going to throw in. The plan set still shows 50 spaces, plus 10 parking spaces, extras. It doesn't say 75 and 10. It doesn't seem like anyone has acknowledged, unless I just have this wrong and everything's fine, to have 75 parking spaces and then have some extra spaces as well for guests. Is that normal and is that okay? I really don't know. That's a true question. I don't expect you to answer now, but we would love to know. If the applicants could perhaps share that after we're done, that would be great. The Conservation Commission, per that meeting, and Georgia hit on this, mentioning something about the groundwater within 8 feet. They had done their test pits and said they didn't hit any groundwater. That is definitely not what we heard on the site walk. I actually heard a different number than even Ms. Bell specified. We heard that at the test pit in the northeastern corner of our property at 32 Ferry, that they went down 2 feet before they found groundwater. And this is the reason, because it has to actually be lower than that the reason that they had to raise it above ground and have the outflow pipe above ground. So I'm hoping that you guys can look into that. 2 little points on zoning. The financial capacity, actually, I won't even cover that because you guys already did. We also noticed that it doesn't appear to be right in comparison to the quote versus the financial capacity. In zoning item 188-705, it mentions containing historical or archaeological sites. I think that the SRS, the Seal Rock Spring, would definitely qualify as a historical site. And there's some question about whether or not it's there, so let's find out. Finally, the crosswalk, we would definitely be in favor of a 3-way stop on that traffic discussion earlier at Ferry and Pine Ridge. I could even see a stop sign that has a red light as opposed to flashing. There's probably a lot of different ways you guys could possibly do that. We are also concerned that people will just still speed, as they already do, so a stop sign really does make sense. And then the open space dilemma, I just made this note before I came up. There is a third alternative to the 2 that have been raised here, and that is to have fewer houses, less density. That's all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, board members, we've heard from some neighbors, received some public comment. Any questions, any additional discussion you'd like to have on any of those items? Any questions that you'd like the applicant to respond to? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one, I guess, for the planning staff and maybe the council liaison. We've never had an application in my time on the board that's come before us with, you know, a question of historical or site of significance. We know the comprehensive plan calls out Seal Rock Springs. The applicant does not own the parcel that we're referring to, but we have this zone of protection that's called out. So how would one go about getting an independent determination? Does that burden fall on the city financially? Does that burden fall on the applicant financially? I'm assuming that it would be no different than any other parcel of land where if they're looking for an aquifer or a spring, you know, these hydrologists, the dowsers, whatever, are going to determine where the groundwater is, but how do we know if that is, quote unquote, the spring? And that's the hardest part for me, is we have a historical site that drew water out and was very popular, but that site that they were drawing from, there's some physical structure left. There's a very reputable survey. Dow and Colomb was like the benchmark of survey in our community for decades. Could there be, I don't know, how do we work through this?
So just a little context about how the city staff approach this. So after, you know, meeting with the public, talking with the applicant, talking with Conservation Commission, this really boils down to the Resource Protection Overlay District. That's where the comp plan calls out for that, where it is, where it lies. Effectively, this is a zoning matter. So when we go to our zoning administrator, which is code enforcement, they do the zoning administration function. We look at it, we have it mapped in our Resource Protection Overlay District. We look at surveys. From the city staff perspective, there was no need to go further. There's no, I say there's no evidence, but I say that very generally speaking. In our zone, it is mapped as Seal Rock Springs. That's how it's been, where it's been for nearly 40 years now. Based on this, we went through some of the previous approvals in this area where this survey came from, how city had looked at it before. I didn't provide, all those files of that project review because it's not really germane, but what we did pull is the survey which we attached. And that survey, has held serviceable, and that kind of establishes the, location of Seal Rock Spring, which goes into whenever that, and I don't know when that zoning map was officially made, 2015, but before probably too. Yeah, but that's where the location is. We didn't feel the need to go any further. And so that's coming from code zoning.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. Well,
Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, that's good to hear from the city staff side, because I've had challenges with this, and I won't go into the past history. I think you've heard enough from the residents that abut. I personally have my own history with the property, or the history of that property. But specifically to your question, Jeff, I've been wrestling, sitting over here, even before I was back appointed as liaison, with this question, because you all are tasked with that language in the ordinance, but it's based on, from what we've been provided, a survey that dates back 40 plus years, thereabouts, to a transfer of, or access to a portion of where, at that time, that spring came from. Again, without going into too much of the history, I'm aware of at least at one point there was 3 locations that aquifer was sourced out of. So the challenge you have is, where do you determine the true aquifer, correct? I mean, I think that's what you're faced with. That's what I've been wrestling with. And when you look at that language, for me, this is actually a larger than just this application issue. You also have Phillips Springs. Can anybody definitively tell me where Phillips Spring is in the city of Saco? The Heath Road Spring and the Jenkins Road Springs. I haven't found any true documentation of where those springs are located outside of it being in the ordinance that dates back to at least the 1970s. So to your point, I think you have a problem. Like from the city perspective, I think we have a problem where you're tasked, the city council tasked you all by adopting that ordinance to protect those springs, but you don't know where that spring is. And you're relying on an applicant, which I understand, they're providing you with the survey, totally get it, but you still have no clear understanding. And to the abutter's point, is it on their property? Because that now impacts how they could develop that property. And when we refer back to prior plans that may have gone through a process that wasn't identified, that doesn't make it right. I still think we have an issue where you need to definitively determine. I'd be happy to look at what the city actually has that defines that location. And everything I've seen, it's a green dot on a map that we adopted several years ago. Prior to that, it was just text. And I think you need to clearly have an understanding of where it's spelt out. We have issues of whether or not spring-fed pond or a gravel pit. I think that what occurred there, based on the history that I'm aware of, is yes, they removed gravel and it filled up with water, which is why they stopped harvesting gravel from that location, because it was spring-fed. I don't know if that answers your question. I have a note that I actually planned on taking this to city council and asking the city to do the study that would be needed to determine where that true spring is, potentially several of the others that we have in the ordinance.
Great, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, that would be kind of the next question. Is it appropriate that we maybe hold our review and ask our liaison to bring that to city council and see if they're willing to fund at least this location to try to determine, because we're feeling like, or at least I feel like, I don't want to speak for the whole board, I feel like I'm at this crossroad. How am I to implement this requirement in our regulation and our zoning and our comprehensive plan to protect this, but we don't know exactly where it is? And if they could, we're going to bring it to them and say, hey, we need more information. Are they willing to find a way to help us protect that? Or are they going to say that it's not in their budget? I think that needs to go to them, and because they're the ones that would handle the repercussion if we error, right? If we do another location and we say, oh, we didn't map it out, and they find that it's there, I guess is my question, right? We should at least get some independent scientific data on this aquifer, how big it is, where it might actually be mapped, is kind of, and how do they historically identify the existence? Is it where the point of the head or the tap is, or is it the actual aquifer that we're worried about water infiltrating? I guess I would be in favor at this point, kind of holding off and let's see what council is willing to do. If they say, no, we're willing to take the risk, we're not funding it, and it comes back to us, then we have to make a decision. But at this point, I kind of feel like I need more data.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts? Chris?
Yeah, obviously this goes beyond my scope of expertise, but I would imagine that something of this nature would be rather expensive. Again, I don't know, but, and I don't know, again, assuming, I imagine it'd be very time consuming as far as like having the city council approve it, finding someone who could do the work, getting it done. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean it's not necessary, but it does seem a big burden for the applicant to have to sit in limbo for a long period of time for an issue that may even not get resolved when it's all said and done. I just know from my own line of work that sometimes it can take a long time to get a firm answer on something like this. I mean, it could be years, it could be very quick, easy, oh, it's right there. And I'm trying to weigh that with the applicant's need to have some sort of resolution with the project. At least that's my initial thoughts and concerns on that sort of proposal.
Great, thank you, Chris. Any other thoughts from board members?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I guess, I mean, I understand the applicant's need and desire to have resolution, but the neighbors have a need and desire to know where the spring is because it impacts them conceivably. I mean, it may well be on one of the neighbors' properties. It's probably not on this property. It sounds like the general consensus is the spring is not on this property, but how close is it to the boundary lines? And maybe it is on this property. I mean, sounds like it could be on 32, it could be out back. If none of us know and we have good information coming from both sides, I think it's worth, asking if the city can get us some more information.
Thank you, Joyce. Jim, did you have a thought or question too? Sorry, before you start, Jason. To both to Chris's, Nate's point and question, Charles' comments. I agree with Councilor Johnson. There's a lot maybe to do at the council level. But to Charles' point, we have a zoning map, we have our ordinance, and we're tasked with reviewing our standards, applying them, and the board is, to be simple for a moment, the board's either satisfied that the applicant has provided substantial evidence, or we're not. So that's just kind of bringing it down for a moment. That's still, if the board's not satisfied, then we ask for more information. But additionally with that, it's the application site and property. I think asking what's happening on all these other properties, what may or may not be happening beyond that of what's in our zoning and what the applicant has provided is, I think the board just needs to be careful as to a precedent that may or may not start. That's a concern of mine in the back of my head. That's all. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree. I mean, we don't want to set this precedence, but most of the time we deal with applicants that come before us and abutters that are worried about, well, is it a tributary to Cascade Brook, a specific brook, right? And there's that delineation about where that starts. And when the city engineer fires back and says, no, it's an unnamed tributary, we don't worry about it, it's not classified, that's kind of a line, right? When we're talking about setbacks from a stream or a channel, was it the center of the channel, is it the edge of the bank, is it the horizontal? We oftentimes ask the question and we get feedback and make a decision. Yes, that's in our ordinance, that's what we review, that professional opinions, a wetland of significance we're going through, right? But it's very rare that we have 6 locations that are called out in our zoning that says protect these natural features. Well, that's the gray area. We're asked to protect it, and my mechanical side would say, yeah, that's where the wellhead was, that's the brick ruin, that's where Down Column put it, boom, we're done. But if they're right, and we didn't do our job to protect it, and it was in our ordinance, we failed. And in this rare situation, the abutters are saying, you have full access to our property. It's not always where you have that. They can make the claim and say, oh, no, we don't want you to study, because the inverse effect would be that they're going to pinpoint the aquifer or the space on the abutter's property, and the abutter's property just decreased in value because now they can't develop it because we've identified it, we've mapped it, and we have to resource protect all the way around it. So what we might think was a 400-foot diameter around a wellhead turns out to be a 400-foot diameter around a 1,600-foot aquifer. Is that what's going to happen I mean, but we need that technical information. Or council says, you know what, that's old verbiage and we don't really need to protect these unknown springs, let's get it out of there. That's their prerogative. But until they make that decision, I say we need to kick it back, and either we need funding to figure out and get a true legal opinion of this, because we can't do our job. My volunteer role is to look at the ordinance and see how it applies. And this one is very difficult, and I think we need more technical information. And like they said, we're not asking the applicant to go off the parcel property, the proposed parcel property, but we have to be aware of this buffer zone. And that's where the challenge is. So it's a great opportunity where the neighbors are saying, hey, you can have access. And they also understand that they could change the value of their property. But I think at the very least, we should ask our liaison to bring it back up and say, would they be willing to fund it? Because I wouldn't want to make that mistake.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. So Jim, go ahead.
Well, I mean, as the city planner noted, the individual in the city who's responsible for, zoning enforcement matters is a code enforcement officer. And the code enforcement officer apparently is satisfied that the location of the spring is where that brick ruins is located. If I understood correctly. So if that's the case, I think, we're going to be going on some long-term fishing expedition to find out if there is also some other location for the Seal Rock Spring. And I think that goes beyond our role on the planning board. It's seldom with any project that comes before us that we have 100% certainty about anything. We rely on experts to give us their opinions. We make our best judgment under the ordinances and the regulations that the city council has provided us. So I'm confident enough that the spring is located where those brick ruins are. Now, am I 100% certain of it? Of course not. I mean, I don't know, but that's what the evidence that I've seen points to. So I don't think it's fair to for us to impose upon either this applicant the burden of trying to see if there's some other location for the spring as well. No offense to our city council, but I cannot imagine that if they ever entertain this idea of searching for the location of all these springs, that they would pony up the money to do it, because as Chris noted, I would imagine that'd be an incredibly expensive and time-consuming exercise, and I'm not confident that we're going to get any information better than what we already have.
Thank you, Jim. So just for a moment, two sides, I'm going to play two sides of the coin here for a moment. I agree with you, Jeff. That's protecting the springs are important. I can't disagree with that, of course. On the other side, we're talking about our zoning map has the area defined. It's noted. There's surveys that agree with that, and now we're really essentially asking for a zoning map amendment. We're asking for a potential for these locations or additional locations to be found or surveyed. I think it's, to Councilor Johnson's point earlier, it's sort of a big picture piece, but I want to be cautious as to, so we have an application based on a zoning map, based on our information, and we're, I guess, for a moment, I don't think we can ask for a zoning map amendment in the middle of an application and start changing things in the middle of it. I think these are good questions. It needs to be protected, the springs, but what we may find or may not find, I don't know if that's for I guess for today's, I don't know, there's a lot of questions here. It's a bigger picture. It's much more complicated than that, I know, of course, but, Charles, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I think that's a good overview of this conversation here. Where city staff is our ordinance and our zoning map today. That is where we kind of base our search. That's what we base the memo I wrote on. And again, I know this is a big issue here, and I don't want to move on, but there's also other topics from the public we can discuss too, that I don't want to forget about. So I think that the applicant does want to comment on the wetland. They might have more information to provide. I can go a little bit more into the background of, you know, that Dow Coulomb survey, where we pulled it from, and kind of how it relates. And I think I just want to bring it up just so everyone's clear on what we're talking about here. And I hope I click this button and it works. Nope, that is not the right button. I've never pressed that button before. So just looking at this here, and I will just pull it up because I want to full screen it. Don't mind me, just do tech stuff. When you look at this survey, the Dow Coulomb, so this is where this survey is pointing towards. I have the lot in the memo. This is the location of it that's surveyed. So this became the basis. This is in our zoning map. This is what we're looking at. Where this was a part of, where this is coming from, is the development of the Goose Fair Acres, so kind of off of Old Orchard Road. That project was approved with a lot of hydrogeologic geologist studies on this. I didn't provide that because they were just indicating that this is where Seal Rock Spring is. It does note that the water flows in this area where the gravel pit was. And so that is when we look at, you know, to the question of where we're making that decision from, this, I think what the chair was saying, this survey matches our zoning map, which is in our ordinance says Seal Rock Springs. It's mapped and surveyed here. So to the extent of our current ordinance regulations and zoning map, I think this is how planning and codes have kind of come to this decision. Whether to, you know, go beyond and pause the application review until we have, you know, full understanding. I will leave that to planning board and council to make that decision, but as it comes for this application, this was the determination of the zoning administrator. I think everything kind of beyond that, or code enforcement officer, going beyond that, you know, I hear the public comment, I hear the conversation from the boards, but what we're looking at as city staff to make our determination was the survey. Yeah, and I did mention in the, just to give a little bit more context, in the memo, reaching out, the hydrogeologic assessment wouldn't make this determination. It's not required as part of this application. They're connecting to public water. The ordinance language in that section is may, so the planning board may require it. And then, you know, when we got the feedback from the hydrogeologic peer review that it's not required, the planning board didn't require it application completeness. And then I asked the follow-up question of, you know, how do you determine that? And it is more of a in-depth analysis that is costly with labor. So that's all in the memo, and that's just some of the information and the context I wanted to provide for the planning board. But into the response, like, this is what we're looking at with today's ordinance.
All right, thank you, Charles. Any other thoughts or questions briefly from board members? So as a reminder, the public hearing is still open, but Mr. Labonte, go ahead if you have thoughts or questions or comments.
Yeah, I'd like to say, I mean, you know, this project's on my property, not on everybody else's. I mean, you know, it's to sit back and say, well, I think there might be something on my property, and, you know, it's up to the city or the applicant or whoever else to find it. It doesn't, you know, this sounds like a witch hunt. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense at all to sit there for somebody to come up here and just say, well, there could be something on my property, and it's up to you guys to find it. I mean, that's not evidence. That doesn't give any solidity to anything that they're saying one bit. First of all, this project's on my property, okay? So it's never been required to go on everybody else's property to do diligence on everybody else's property, whether they got a gravel pit that's filled with water or whatever it is. Everything we've done, we have showed that stormwater works, everything else works. We met the ordinance on everything that's on my property. We found a natural spring, a historic spring. We've got a survey of it back in the 1960s. We've actually got data all the way back into the 1800s of their so-called newspaper clippings that actually does put it in the location at the rear of their property when those properties were all reconfigured and, you know, there was 6 lots into one. And that even checks out. So, I mean, we've got evidence from newspaper clippings that checks out back in like 1910 or 1920. And then we have a survey in 1960. Like, there's nothing ever saying that it's anywhere else. So all the research we've done, we've proven it. We've showed it. The town maps show it. I mean, for somebody to just sit there and say, well, it could be somewhere else, that doesn't even make any sense. So for me to hold up my project for months on end, this doesn't even make any sense to me. Now, if they want to develop their property a year or two down the road or whatever, and they want to go see if there's a spring to hinder them, that's on them. That should have nothing to do with my project. My project is today and now. If the ordinance want to change next year or the year after, that's fine. But I shouldn't have to wait for, you know, for this state or city to change, adopt things, and because there might be something out there. So I'm just baffled why we're even discussing this. But so thank you.
Thank you. Remaining thoughts, questions from board members?
Chair, there were a couple other public comments I think it would be nice to address as well. One was parking. The memo provides an overview of the parking. It's a minimum parking requirement. So with 25 units, looking at, there's some description of how we came to it. The requirement would be 50, so 2 per single family, and then 4 for visitors parking for multifamily use. So that's 54 parking spaces, which is, the applicant is providing at least a minimum of 60. There's some conversation, but if you could fit 2 cars in the lot, some of the notes that we provided is showing that the driveway length is longer, 4 feet longer than the required parking space, so 9 by 18. Those driveways are 9 by 22 to allow for the crosswalk. We count 60 parking spaces a minimum, even though just doing 1 in the garage, 1 in the parking space, and then there's 10 visitors parking. Just other public comment that not related to the spring as well, that I did just want to touch on. Again, I think we've all discussed financial capacity, so I think that's an agreement that just needs to be updated. And then let me just scroll down to here. There was some conversations about allowable density. Again, I mentioned at the last meeting that this is below the maximum density threshold for the proposed use. And I think we've made good progress on traffic as well. So I think if there's any other of the public comment that the planning board wants to, ask questions or clarify, I'm happy to help, or the applicant's here as well.
Great, thank you, Charles. Board members, any questions for staff or any additional questions, comments on any other public comment? Questions regarding public comment? Jeff?
So Craig, just to kind of touch base on the stormwater treatment and the 2 outfalls. When I started doing this, I was always very skeptical, but having done it quite a few times, the HydroCAD modeling is very accurate. The performance is usually very good. My question is, where there's so much concern about the outfall that's going to track through the wetland, I think it's kind of the north corner, the mid one by the pool house. If that were to be rerouted and the storm detention was a little bit bigger at the lower elevation, would you be able to maintain the post treatment? Or would there just be too much volume heading to one area at one time?
Yeah, if we redirected it to, say, the northwest corner, that spot where we went and looked, it wouldn't be matching the existing conditions. So the stormwater report has the tables that compare both the pre and the post conditions that show that we have less peak rates of runoff at those 3 study points. At this point, I believe we have sign off from the city engineer on the whole stormwater system. We've had some back and forth with the engineer, and we meet main DEP standards, we meet city standards. There's less runoff in the proposed condition than existing as it relates to peak rates of runoff. There were test pits that were done on the site, as noted, and yes, several of those test pits did identify seasonal high groundwater table, one of which was pretty deep at 84 inches. The other one was a little bit more shallow at this under drain soil filter, deeper than 2 feet as noted by the abutter, but shallow enough where we couldn't use an infiltration basin at that location, which is why we went with the under drain soil filter. All of the BMPs on site are designed to meet the state standards. The standards for how we calculate the rainfall totals, that's all from, again, Appendix H of Chapter 500 of Maine DEP standards. So we've met the standards which was my job to do as part of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other thoughts from board members? Jim?
Craig, so I think you started out your presentation suggesting that you had a little more work to do with the final plan for the, checking some off-site trees or something like that?
So that was done today. There were 2 trees that were found. One's in the most northwest corner, which is over by the plunge pool, about 10 feet off the property line. So that tree will not be impacted. The other one is located kind of like midway on the east side over on the Seal Rock property. And we intend to reach out to Seal Rock to see if they would want that tree removed. If not, we can easily adjust the grading to just mound up around that area to protect the root system. So 2 trees greater than 24 inches were identified today, and we can show that on the next plan, but it will result in either no change or very minimal change at that one spot on the eastern property line.
And then the last issue, for me anyway, is that financial capacity letter, and I'm sure that could be produced fairly quickly.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Chair, unless there's more for the public hearing, my inclination is to close the public hearing and then ask the city planner to a bit more formally put together findings of fact and conditions of approval. Because I noted with some of the reviewers, they suggested some conditions of approval could address some of the minor issues. So that's sort of my inclination where I'm thinking of going with this, but again, love to hear other members of the planning board.
Thank you, Jim. Any other thoughts from board members? Jeff?
I guess I'm just kind of torn. I mean, the applicant has provided all this information, but we have this daunting piece of zoning that's laying out there, and if we just sidestep it, it never gets resolved. I don't know. I don't know how long it would take. How long would it take Councilor Johnson to even bring it forth and get an opinion from council? What do we do moving forward? I just feel like I'm being asked to enforce or try to interpret something that has no clear boundaries, and it's a bit challenging. I find it problematic. So.
Thank you, Jeff. Any additional questions for the applicant? Staff?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to close the public hearing.
I second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Chris. Any additional discussion on the motion to close the public hearing? All right, those in favor to close the public hearing, Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Catherine?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Motion passes 5-1. Back to board deliberation. A few questions that we discussed with the applicant, financial capacity. They can revise that. It seemed like the applicant was in support of the sidewalk extension to Pine Ridge with the potential three-way stop, which needs to be reviewed by city staff and DOT. Waiver, Charles, we're still in an opinion that a waiver for the internal landscaping between buildings is required?
The applicant requested a waiver for that.
Sure,
So
okay.
that'd be on you guys to make that determination if it's needed or not.
So the board needs to make a finding on that waiver. Additional, I guess at this juncture, final direction for the applicant, final questions, concerns from board members? Catherine?
Do we also have to make a determination on the open space?
Correct. Yep. Additional thoughts? Jim, you mentioned requesting from staff formal findings of fact and conditions of approval. I think Charles mentioned some information on the findings in the staff memo, but we do need to see conditions of approval as well. But so,
yes, I have them prepared.
As far as waivers or conditions of approval, or
All.
all?
So I think I can show you we can go through this. If you want to go through standard by standard, generally I copied the text from the memo. If it said that the planning board needs to make a finding, like there's some that's like compliance with applicable standards, I kind of made this and said the standard is met. For some of the other ones, and I'll pull it up too. I'm just yapping. So some of these are very standard going through here. Compatibility, it's discussing, what's discussed in the zoning section. Natural features, referencing landscape and wetland wildlife concerns. So a lot of these are lighting, all of these are discussed in the memo, we can go through it. One thing to note is the vehicle circulation and pedestrian improvements. It's here and in the subdivision. We can discuss the language here. I've already drafted the condition, which I'll show you. I feel like everyone's leaning towards Ferry Road and Pine Ridge Road. Applicant, public, planning board seems to be the general consensus. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just based on conversation before. Other locations where we would want to discuss, I think that's pretty much it. There's no further discussion about it. Financial capacity is discussed here, as we've noted a couple times. So when we get down to conditional uses down here as well. So for conditions of approval, right now I have 5 with the rest of the standard conditions of approval, which we've been sharing, and which Jeff includes the underground utility installed by the master electrician. So that language is part of this now. So the first one is the note that the applicant shall include a note that all future buildings shall be constructed with street numbers prominently displayed. That's coming from subdivision. The applicant shall submit an updated tree survey. Capacity to serve letter from Central Maine Power. This is not something we've done historically, but in our, we do ask for utility confirmations. So that is something that I think we're going to be asking for going forward. Next one is the updated financial capacity letter, just to, right that discrepancy. And then this last one is, and these are all part of as final subdivision application. Updated plans and drawings that include sidewalk connection from 42 Ferry Road to the intersection of Pine Ridge Road and Ferry Road, a crosswalk across Ferry Road, installation of an all-way stop, and other recommended improvements for review and approval by the Planning Board, Maine Department of Transportation, and city staff. And Jim, to your point earlier, a lot of these are pulled from the memo as well.
Thoughts, questions from board members on that for a moment? So I guess what I'd like to do is, so we have the waiver on the trees and we have the open space fee in lieu of it. Is there a fee, was there a fee drafted on that, Charles?
No, I did not look for one, and I think we would get the final fee in final subdivision typically, because that's where the open space fee is, or the open space requirement is discussed. So where we would make that determination, sorry, and I did breeze over it, would be in the subdivision standards. I believe either in I don't know if there's a specific sorry, I'm just scrolling through here. I think it would be in one of these standards, because these are the approval standards, but we'd probably fit it under I, conformity with local standards, as it relates to the subdivision ordinance. The open space, and we discussed that in the memo here. So on page, and I'll just, for reference, I can pull it up in a second too once I grab it. Open space, open space. So on page 10 of the memo, and I will pull it up here as well. So this is not, I don't think it'd be, Catherine, to your point, I wouldn't say you'd have to vote on this. It would just be part of the findings. Is it adequate or not? And here's where it's discussed, because it's not part of the subdivision approval. And then we can include if you want to make the fee, we can put that as a condition of approval.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Board members, let's start with the trees, the waiver on the trees. How does the board feel on that request from the applicant on the buffer 188, 711, A6?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we grant the waiver under section 188, 711A6, so that buffers are not required between the multifamily structures.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Chris. Any additional discussion by the board to grant the waiver for section 188, 711A6 for buffers? All right, those in favor, Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 6-0 to grant that waiver. Discussion on the open space.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we determine that the open space provided by the applicant in this application is sufficient thereby not requiring an impact fee.
That was an official motion, yes, Jim? That was the motion? Sorry, I didn't.
That's the
Yes,
motion.
Okay, thank you for the motion.
Second.
Second by Chris. So motion made by Jim, seconded by Chris, to find that the open space as presented as part of this application to satisfy the requirements. Jim, is that including on-site amenities and off-site improvements, and therefore a fee in lieu of is not required or waived?
Yes.
Any board discussion on that motion? All right, those in favor. Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 6-0 on that finding. So, in regards to findings of fact and condition of approval, for a moment here, could we pause and get a motion to extend beyond our 9 o'clock?
So moved. So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Jeff and Chris. Discussion? All right,
Should we set a stop date too, a stop time?
if you would like, sure.
I move that we passed our normal stop time of 9 o'clock to extend to 9:30.
Chris, you amend your second?
I amend my second.
Great, thank you. Additional discussion to continue beyond 9 o'clock to 9:30. All right, those in favor, Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Motion passes 6-0. So with that, findings of fact and conditions of approval for review. Charles has put a draft together in front of us. Any thoughts, discussion? Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we pull up the condition of approval number 5 that we added for the off-site connectivity? Just want to take a second, because I think we all in this moment know exactly what we're asking for. But I'd like to, we've ran into some issues with off-site improvements before, and those of us that are very critical of word choice, if you guys could look at that, because I see that the applicant shall provide updated plans and drawings for this. It never states that it has to be built. So he's going to provide the plans. If DOT or the city for some reason says no, are we going to require an alternative condition that we're looking for him to come up with a path to get them to the existing bike path sidewalk on the other side? I just would hate to have this condition put in there and he'd say, well, I made the plan and DOT shot it down, so we don't do anything at all. Kind of like we had some word choice about working with and it got very cumbersome, right? So I guess if we all just kind of look at that, looking at the two with the background, if we can just think of all the scenarios to make sure that we're not missing a caveat. And I just think that it shall have a plan that will result in construction of even at the applicant's expense? Just, I think it's clear what we're trying to ask for, but how do we make it, bulletproof, we don't end up in a bad situation again?
So.
Sure, thank you. Sorry,
Yeah.
real quick, Charles. So just for the record and moving forward, where we have a little peculiar scenario tonight, we're reviewing findings of fact and conditions of approval. So for this moment, we're reviewing and creating a draft, and we're doing this at a high level, and we're going to bounce around for a minute, I suspect. Just because we didn't have a document to review as part of our packet, so something to work through, and then have discussion with the applicant as well. But I just want to sort of say that out loud, that because we might, usually we go in a particular order that we've had a chance to review, and now we're going to kind of move around a little bit. So, Charles, go ahead, because I couldn't agree with Jeff more.
Yes, to Jeff's point, and I understand the background. So I'll just point to the standard condition of approval, which is develop site according to plan. So site shall be developed and maintained as depicted on the approved plan. So by conditioning this to provide updated plans and drawings that include this, the applicant would be responsible. And in the subdivision standards, the planning board determines the extent. Similar to other projects, there's no, if there was any type of alternative or combination, we would present it with this. This is solely, and it would be solely and entirely on the applicant, and it's based in code, site plan, and subdivision. So I hear your concerns. We can make this to be, any way possible, but I think the conditions that we have here, by having them update the plans, they're showing that as part of their proposed development.
Are you thinking of a case where there were off-site improvements that we required the applicant to work with the city on, right? And these are improvements that are part of the plan itself.
And I think this last section speaks to that, like DOT, it's not like they suggest something and they're like, we suggested it. It needs to be reviewed and approved by the planning board, DOT, and city staff.
Should we have something then that ties it to completion prior to
as part of
certificate of occupancy, or something that site that is done? I don't know. I would like something a little bit stronger, because
Charles, can you show us further down where you talked about the final plans?
Yeah, this has been standard even before I started here, that the site shall be developed and maintained as depicted on the approved site plan. To Jeff's point about tying it to be completed before certificate of occupancy or within X amount of years, I think we should look at that as part of, once we have the plans and drawings, because counterpoint to them at this point, it's a high level conceptual at this point. We just determined that this is the route we would want to go. By requiring during final subdivision application, they can do it. And then as part of that potential approval, I think that would be the time to say before building occupancy, and that would go on the final that condition would go on the final subdivision plan. It would get recorded. And you can put a timeline there. And I think right now it'd be hard to put a timeline on it. We can add some context in terms of how long, estimated time, how long it would be built, so that you can make that decision as part of final subdivision. That would be my recommendation. But to say that it needs to be built right now within 2 or 3 years of final subdivision approval would be tough without having any plans.
So that makes sense to me, where we're not in final, and in order for the final subdivision application, we need this. Otherwise, this condition hasn't been met and the application's not complete. So I share your concern, Jeff, and I hear what Charles is saying, and that makes sense to me. I guess I have one word that I want to change. Yeah, right there where it says "and." I'd like that to say "or." And I guess I feel like it should be "or," because in discussion with DOT and city staff, if another alternative comes up or there's other, or if there's other recommendations, then I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I guess Andy's just, I
Mr.
feel like
Chair.
or covers everything.
Well, I agree with you. I think inserting the word "or" rather than "and" helps a great deal, because I was looking about the required installation of an all-way stop. I mean, I think that would be a great solution. But what if DOT says, well, rather than an all-way stop, you just have one of those lit crosswalks like exist down Richards Way, and they may say that is a better solution there. I would hate to have us, insist upon an all-way stop if DOT had some other solution that would be effective. So your changing of that word and to or accomplishes that. So I agree with you, Mr. Chair.
I think with that, we've had it comes up every once in a while, we bring up a raised speed table. And I think DOT or DPW typically isn't in favor of it. However, there's one in Pepperell Square. We put some on Route 1 over the summer. So I'm just thinking about other options that might come up. And I'm just trying to cover all our bases, I guess. Okay, keep going. Any other thoughts? Charles, if we jump to findings of fact again, were there any that you had tagged as still needing board to make a finding?
I had written this, during earlier items tonight. So it would just, I think we can just write this, that the, something along the lines is that the planning board recommends extending the sidewalk from the site to Pine Ridge Road, the intersection of Pine Ridge Road and Ferry Road. And then that this has been included as a condition of approval. Unless you want more in-depth finding here.
I think maybe a general statement of that based on the application materials, discussion, testimony, and conditions of approval, the board finds that this standard has been met, something along those lines, if the board agrees.
Mr. Chair, could we look at, I think it's under site plan, facts, under B. We could just take a look at that.
We just want to walk through from the top while we're here.
I was just going to say, can we start? Yeah, let's just start at the top, please.
So any comments on A, B, or C?
Did your facts start with the subdivision or with site plan? Charles?
Site plan.
Yeah, so if we could start there.
I thought I was at site plan, that's my bad. It's late. So A, B, or C?
Those look more comprehensive than I remember reading before, so I'm just looking at them. It looks, those look fine to me. On E, I think you did include the numbers either on the front of the building or on a signpost. I think you already did include that as a condition of approval.
Yes.
So we could take out that second to the last sentence in that section.
I think, does that lighting make sense?
I think that looks good. Jeff?
Well, I would say that there, you proposed that there will be drawing plans for the crosswalk at Pine Ridge, and yeah, if they'll probably put a utility-mounted light there, and that would be included in that plan. I don't think it has to be included into the site-specific plan. I mean, well, it's going to be site-specific, right? It's going to be, there'll be an excerpt, I'm assuming, or a page for the off-site improvements, so.
Yeah, it could, I'll just do plans and drawings, keep it.
Exactly, yeah, thank you.
I was just adding the language that we just wrote for the.
That's great.
I will delete this as well. Good for G, H, and I.
Yep.
Can you jump to G for a moment?
Yes.
So G, the second to last paragraph, the applicant has indicated they will be submitting an updated tree survey. We have a condition, is there a condition? Well, I guess let's just add as part of any final subdivision application.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay.
We looked at H and I, so I'll go to JK. These are no floods, wastewater, the homeowner docs have been studied. So here's stormwater real quick. Overview of it, and then
You know, I did want to mention, apparently our city ordinances limit the type of storm events we need to monitor to 50-year storm events, and I certainly appreciate the concerns of the neighbors, you know, depending on how you believe in science, there's, you know, certainly storms are more dangerous today than they were just a few years ago, but the problem we have on the planning board is that if our ordinances only require us to look at a 50-year storm events, then we really can't hold an applicant to 100-year storm events, or, but I certainly acknowledge that the neighbors' concerns about that are real, and I don't mean to minimize that in any way.
Thank you, Jim. Charles, could we jump back to the verbiage on J? Okay. Any thoughts from board members on P, Q, or R as we have them before us?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, on P, what weight do we put in the Conservation Commission's concern about a greenway? I find it hard to fit that into what is proposed for the design, the applicant's, layout, meeting some of the infill goals of the city. I don't know, I guess, I'm not on the Conservation Commission, but I didn't see that as a very heavily traveled throughway, any more so than any other open parcel within most areas of the city, I guess. But at the same time, I was very happy to see, Charles, that, I had a request from the Conservation Commission, hey, I want more substance, and boy, did they turn around and they gave us a lot of substance, which was a very nice, but at the same time, now we have to weigh out those aspects that they pointed out and how we weighed into our review. So, I know U.S. Fish and Wildlife had their report, and we ruled out, a lot of the wintering area concerns. And I guess that's why what the board thinks about, do we add some context in there with regards to that green beltway pathway?
I'm not opposed to incorporating a comment within that finding regarding the Conservation Commission's report, and the board's review of that report, and or the board's request or recommendations of its material or recommendations. Does that make sense? Was it, unfortunately, a little bit of a non-answer, but I agree. I think having verbiage in there that the board did receive a report from the Conservation Commission as requested. The board reviewed that report, and I guess at the moment the board hasn't made a request to the applicant to provide such greenway. The board has agreed with the documentation of large caliper trees at 24 inches above, and the applicant has done that, will provide that plan. There's just a little bit of facts right there for the moment, but.
Yeah, I think that's very important, right, that we acknowledge it, and I guess in my mind, when they talk about a greenway, in the applicant's hands are bound, that the lot is only so wide, and I would envision a greenway of what the Conservation Commission is talking about for wildlife to be like the full width of the lot. And like I said, we never had anybody come back and say it's a high crash area on the ferry road for deer crossing or anything like that. I mean,
Yeah,
So-
it's not in that deer wintering area.
well, we know it's not a deer wintering area, right?
Yeah.
And we've heard people saying that, yeah, they're using it to get towards the river. There's places near my land that that the deer travel regularly, very defined, but they're usually a wide enough buffer, greenway that's 400, 500 feet wide where they feel like they can safely get through there. We're not creating a 25-foot strip thinking that wildlife is going to sneak through the backyards. So I guess in my mind, it's a bit of a reach, or my interpretation is that their greenway would be too wide to fit into the project. That's my thought. But I like that we acknowledged it.
I agree. All right, and Charles, on traffic, you made some edits to that one as well?
Not
Oh.
here, but I did add that language up on vehicle circulation, pedestrian,
Sorry, yes.
which you're looking for. So traffic is standard. Water quality is discussed. This is, the utilities is where we find the central main power. So I'll be looking for that going forward. We'll scroll down to the last one too.
Any comments from board members on R, S, or T?
Oops, sorry. So I'll say for subdivision, a lot of this is, copied from, we can still go through just to determine, but a lot of the language is similar between the two.
Could we maybe possibly, Mr. Chair, look at pollution? Maybe just solidify that, the applicant is using BMPs that were reviewed by peer review as well, or at least as well by the city engineer. To the satisfaction of the city engineer. Using accepted design standards.
Okay, Charles, maybe
Can we
this is a
edit?
dumb question, but what's the difference between B and C, sufficient water and public water supply?
I think the B is, did they have water? Yes or no? And C is, if they're connecting to public water, is it going to cause an unreasonable burden? And this is just wrong. I think I meant to say public sewer, so that's on my bad. There is no difference in this situation. And that's from 188 from the model state ordinance.
See, I interpreted B as being sufficient water if they were using private wells, and C,
I think I may have got it messed up in my head.
if they're using public water, and that's where the capacity to serve letter came in. That's the way I interpreted it.
Yeah, I agree.
Does that switch work? Cool.
Yes.
I'm good with D and F. I don't know how others feel.
So I can pull the same language from above down here if you would like real quick. This one. Cool. Good with this? So this is the language that you guys added before, just to acknowledge that it's here. On the open space, there's no good spot for it, but could go above, but it works here as well. And I didn't put language here, so apologies.
Can we jump back to J for a moment? So this, I'm going to make it confusing for a moment. So the site work improvements, the fee shown here does not include any of the sidewalk and street crossing or anything in there. So I guess I want to be clear. I think we should be clear that this financial capacity that we're talking about and requesting here is for this application. And when final subdivision comes, if it's different and it needs to be updated for final, it would be updated for final. If they both come together as one, then it's all the same. Does that make sense to the board? Does that make sense, Charles, that there's the financial capacity here for what we've done here, and that should be satisfied.
I think
It should be coordinated with the set of plans received in this
Yeah,
application.
I think the language that Charles just included addresses that, which is a very good point, Mr. Chair. You made.
Okay.
Do we want to extend past 9:30 to finish the review of these documents?
I don't think our SOP allows us to, but let's
Got 5 minutes, we're good.
let's keep going. All right.
Oh, I see what I did wrong here. Let me just pull different language. I see what I did wrong. Give me 1 second. So. I don't know why it's copied like this, my bad, but. So J is related to shoreline zoning, so I'm just gonna go to L. K is.
Any thoughts or comments from board members on L, M? So M-N-O.
I don't think we changed anything in the stormwater.
I don't believe we did.
No spaghetti lots, no great ponds. This is traffic related again. And then this is the sidewalk connections. Going to conditional use, there's a lot pulled from above as well. So you have, applicable standards and federal laws. More on the street network and lighting and traffic. This is buffering, and we've discussed buffering. And this, in the context of the waiver as well. The proposed use is residential and is not going to unreasonably have a detrimental effect.
Is that verbiage correct, the proposed multifamily use, up to 8 units per building?
Yeah, so it is a multifamily use, but we just the code officer looked at single-family use for parking, because the buildings are single-family. But the proposed use is multifamily, because we're not creating multiple lots. So that's what makes it a conditional use.
I understand.
Again, stormwater, flood hazards, wastewater and solid waste, scenic vistas or significant wildlife, as noted above. And then traffic, not increasing the level of service on Ferry Road or decreasing the level of service. Not to burn through those quickly, but if you want to go through any of them, please let me know.
Do we want to include some of that language for number 9, about the off-site improvement to get to a...
I think for consistency, we should.
It's one of these. Pull it from up here. I'll find it. Was it towards the end of subdivision? Cool, added that. And then we're back to the conditions of approval. And again, just to run through them, building and signpost, updated tree survey, capacity from CMP, updated financial capacity, and then the sidewalk connection. And then, yeah, the standard conditions.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we adopt the findings of fact and approve the conditions of approval for the 42 Ferry Road map.
2234.
Map 22, lot 34.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim, and the second, Chris. Any additional discussion on the motion to adopt the findings of fact and conditions of approval as drafted and amended this evening? All right, those in favor. Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Abstain.
Catherine?
Yes.
A vote yes. Motion passes 5-0, 1 abstention.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we grant preliminary subdivision approval, site plan approval, and conditional use approval for the 42 Ferry Road, map 22, lot 34.
Second.
Thank you for the motion, Jim. The second, Chris. Any additional discussion on the motion to grant preliminary subdivision approval, conditional use, and site plan for 42 Ferry Road. All right, those in favor, Chris?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Jeff?
Abstain.
Catherine?
Yes.
A vote yes. Motion passes 5-0 with one abstention. All right, is there anything else on this item that we've not covered, Charles? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, Charles, we've made a motion to go beyond 9 o'clock to 9:30. It's 9:33 p.m. We have a few remaining items on our agenda this evening: general correspondence, planning department updates, board comments, excuse me. Is there any items that you want to address or go over?
No, for general correspondence, we received nothing. I would just tell everyone to get home safely. Drive safe. And then for just planning updates, this memo that you received was, the memo that you received is kind of the new direction I'm going, more comprehensive. It's kind of everything that I could look at. There are some things that, weren't applicable that I'd include. But it'd be really helpful for me if you could, not to look at the memo in detail again, but tell the chair, send your thoughts to the chair on the memo, what would help you. I'm trying to keep, evolving this. I think this memo was really helpful for me to walk through all the standards. And I think it really helped for a conversation tonight in terms of keeping it really structured and focused. So if you could send your thoughts to the chair, to myself, just trying to make this a little bit better. And there was a picture in it this time.
I thought it was incredibly helpful, so appreciate it.
Any other thoughts from board members? Questions? All right, well, thank you again, everyone, for staying a bit late. Oh, sorry.
I thought we had planning board comments, but.
Oh, yeah, that was, sorry. General.
Just wondering, can we, I was looking through the long-range planning committee's, role, and every year we're supposed to be getting an update, like a comparison of the number of building permits units that were provided. Haven't seen that in a year or two. So can we kind of see if that is something that's available? Then there's the 5-year big window update, but that might be helpful as we look at some of these projects that are coming up to know how much housing stock have we been achieving in the previous years, or units. You'd like to know where to, like which zones?
Yeah, I've been looking to track that data, and I've been working with Emily to figure out where that is and how we can get that, and I will report back to you.
Thank you.
Soon.
Yeah, any additional thoughts from board members? Questions, comments? All right, thank you again, everyone. Take it easy on the way home, drive safe. We'll see everyone at our next meeting. We'll adjourn at 9:36 p.m. Thank you.